November 6th meeting of the Lynchburg City School Board is now called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first order of business is the approval of tonight's agenda. The school board chair I recommend that the school board approve the agenda for the November 6, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Dr. Coleman. Ms. Carter. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next order of business is to amend the agenda that we just approved. The additional item is that was an addition for the personnel report. So I recommend that the school board approve the amended agenda to include the personnel report. Dr. Gupta, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Carter, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, so the agenda has been approved as amended. That now takes us to special presentation part of our meeting, and the first item is the Virginia School Board Association Academy Awards, and I think we have a few people getting them.
We do. So I got notes, Smith, thing to read here. Hold on, let me catch up to myself. And I'm losing my voice, so I apologize up front, but on behalf of Virginia School Boards Association, we'd like to thank them for supporting our strategic plan goal number 2, specifically objective 2.51, which talks about board members implementing high-performing school board practices that support positive student outcomes. And part of that includes the board members attending training and becoming knowledgeable about things that are important for school systems and for students. And we have board members who have participated in lots of training. VSBA recognizes board members for their service in various ways, and they have a recognition program that includes certificate and pins. So I have the awards here. My first award for certificate of recognition goes to Dr. Mike Nellis. Congratulations. Yes, you can clap.
We can applaud it.
You can, yes. The second one goes to Dr. Brennan. Yay. All right. And this one, which actually has a pen attached to it, which is I think it's an award of achievement, because you get pens, goes to Ms. Carter. And next, with nice pen attached to it, is Ms. Morrison.
Oh, thank you.
And then we have, with a pen, Dr. Sinha. And of course, our last but not least, never least, Dr. Coleman.
And that certainly is not the last one.
No, not at all. You have more?
We have one for Award of Achievement for Dr. Crystal Edwards for your commitment to effective school board governance through your participation.
Oh, thank you. So I didn't even know I qualified for this. So as I said, one of our goals for personnel growth, development, and success is for all of our staff to be trained, and we consider our board members to be part of our staff because they have an important role in the lives of children. So just like our teachers go through professional development, we are so happy that you do too, and glad to have this honor. So thank you.
Thank you. That now leads us. Thank you all for participating in that training. I think we've become better board members because of it. The second part of the special presentation, voluntary OCR monitoring and school accreditation results, Dr. Edwards and Dr. Coleman.
Yes, so we're going to tag team this one. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to invite Dr. Coleman up towards the end of this presentation. So a couple meetings ago, we talked about the 2014 voluntary resolution agreement that Lynchburg City Schools entered with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. And at that time, there have been some studies done between 2009 through 2011 regarding the access and participation of African American students in advanced AP and honors coursework, as well as a look at the disproportionality in exclusionary practices and suspension for African American students. Since 2014, so the first item that the board has in their packet, and I color-coded them for you, is a copy of the original letter that the former superintendent received in 2014, which states that the division is entering into this voluntary resolution agreement. It's a pretty lengthy letter, but it also gives all of the data that was collected over the 2009 to 2011 period from students and staff, showing some of the stats in terms of students' participation in advanced classes, student suspension by school, and this was just for African Americans and white students. So this is not a complete study of special education ELL, just for African American white students. And I mean, the white sheet is pretty detailed in the information that it showcases, which really set the foundation for we needed to do some more work in Lynchburg City Schools to increase the number of students who had access and participate in programs, as well as reduce the disparities between students who were part of exclusionary practices and suspensions. So historically, I wanted to just give you that so that you have the information regarding that. It is a complete packet, so I'm looking at the clerk, the whole thing goes together, it's a complete packet. The second page is the letter that I received, which is almost, 5 years later, in August 2019, from the Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education, that basically says that they are releasing us from the voluntary resolution, that we have done our due diligence in our efforts to increase enrollment, look and review assessments, examine our exclusionary practices, put some policies in place, do some training. There were a number of things that we were required to do, and that the OCR will no longer be monitoring our progress as they have been over the last couple of years. So let me be clear, that's a great letter that we've been released for monitoring, but that does not mean that we have solved all the problems for achievement gap and disparity. So I really want to be clear about the difference between what the letter does, but we still have work to do in Lynchburg City Schools in terms of some of the things that we need to do for our students. So I wanted to just share that with you so that you also have that information. And then I thought it would be important for you to see some of the things that were done. And what I'll do is take us back in time to 2013, 14, 15, 16, when some of the study work was done. And then when Dr. Coleman comes up, he'll talk a little bit about current year's accreditation status and some things of where we are and some practices that we have right now. So you have a couple different sheets. The blue sheet is actually from IDRA, which is the Intercultural Development Research Association. One of the first things that we entered into our voluntary agreement was we had to hire a consultant to work with Lynchburg City Schools to evaluate our data, our practices, and help us as we move towards having a better equity. And this is one of the agencies. There's another agency, which we'll get to, that did some research. The research that they did focused on two areas as they describe it. One is rigor, so that's the academic excellence part of it, and the second part is discipline. With rigor was focusing only on the advanced and AP courses and the dual enrollment, Gov School at the high school, advanced courses at the middle school, and at our elementary school, the Go Center courses. So that was the only area that they focused their study on, and again, looking at the differences between Black students and white students and no other populations or subgroups. So what I have for you is the summary and the highlights, and I'll go through some of the highlights of what the IDRA found and some recommendations that they had for us. I will make note that there are references to charts and data and tables. And one of the reasons why I did not include all of that is in some cases, some of these charts and data and tables talk about one or two students. And given the time, the breakdown, the school, the class, it's possible that you could actually identify who the kids are. So to protect some of the kids' identities, I did not photocopy all the charts and data, but where we could give large information, we did, and I thought the summary did a good job of talking about some of that, which I will go through. First, on the third page of the blue sheet, we go right to the highlights. It talks about high school highlights, but I will also point out somewhere in here, they talk about the Gov School, but they don't have a section called not Gov School, the Go Center, but they don't have a section called Elementary. So I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. One of the things that we looked at was AP enrollment in Black student enrollment in AP classes, as well as the gap between the number of white students enrolled and the number of Black students enrolled. So they looked at the data two ways. They looked at, did the number of Black students increase over time in courses? And even if that increased, did the gap between white students and Black students decrease? So in some cases, you have a positive result for both. Some cases you have a negative result for both. In some cases you may see one go up and one go down in terms of that. But some of the things that are in this highlighted report is there were 53 at the time that they did the study from 2013 to 17, 53 advanced and AP courses that they looked at the high schools, both high schools. And of those courses, more than half, 27 of them, showed an increase in the number of Black students enrolled in those courses. So there was a positive trend to having more and more Black students enrolled in these AP and advanced courses. If you look at the Gov School at the same time, from 2013 to 2017, there were no Black students enrolled for the first 3 years of the study. And then there was an increase by 14%, I guess you say, a few students did. So that was another one where we see an increase. On the contrary, under high school, here it is, the second bullet from the bottom, the enrollment of Black students in the Go Center over that same time decreased. So even though we saw some positive results, we did see some results where the enrollment did decrease over time. Second page, or behind that, it talks a little bit about the middle school, and we do offer some advanced classes in math in the middle school, and at this time we had them in reading in the middle school. And the middle school was quite interesting because you could see trends from the different middle schools. Sandusky probably had the smallest gap between Black and white students in terms of participation, whereas Lincoln had larger gaps between the white and Black students in participation. There were some areas in which we saw the percentages climb significantly, and that's not the positive part of this when we're talking about the gaps between white student participation and Black student participation. What's not in here is any of the discussion points that might say why. And if you know anything about high school scheduling, sometimes a course will decrease in enrollment because a new course is offered at the same period and students want to go to that. So I'm just giving you raw data without the benefit of the conversations, the look back in time to see if there were other factors that played into any of that. But I did want to kind of go a little bit more in detail that's not in here and give you a little perspective of what I saw over that 3-year period from 2013 to 2017. When I looked just at the high school, both high schools during that time, and we looked at all of the advanced courses, what I saw was lower enrollments in 9th grade. And then as the study continued with 10th grade, you see more Black students enroll. And then in 11th grade, particularly at both high schools, actually, you'll see all of the courses have an increase in Black student enrollment, and that continues over 12th grade, which really says when students entered the school at that point, they may not have been taking advanced coursework, but as they traveled from 10th grade to 11th grade, or at least in those grade levels, more and more students had access to that particular coursework. And there were different trends. I couldn't even identify whether or not it was math or always history. It varied from course, grade level, and building. So I can't say for sure that Black students had a tendency to love the history courses more than the math courses. It really was all over the place in terms of where you saw the increases and decreases in student enrollment. And again, anybody who's worked in a high school, some of that has to do with also the instructor of the course and the culture and climate that's created at that time. And that information I don't have here. The Go Center, again, just talking a little bit about that one, we're seeing that the number of Black students has declined over time, at least during this time period. And I do recall that we actually saw a decrease last year to this year, and part of the reason I do know that when we talked with some of the families is the kids were enjoying the programs at their base school, that they didn't want to leave their base school to go to the Go Center. I don't know what that data is for this time period back here. So that's a little bit on the rigor part of it. The second part was discipline and suspensions and exclusionary practices and reportable and non-reportable offenses. So reportable offenses would be those that we have to report to the police department, and non-reportable would be disrespect, just being disorderly in the classroom, those kinds of things. So on the next sheet, which is orange, take you to the orange sheet. And this one was done by Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, who worked with the division. And they looked at the number of referrals for across schools, across grade levels to see what kinds of trends. Particularly, there was a lot of work done in the elementary schools where the populations are different. And what they were looking for is if, the populations of Black students is 49% in a school, does the population of suspensions or exclusionary practices represent 49%, or is it more or higher? And in most of the schools, with the exception of, I think, Bass Elementary School, there was a disparity in the number of exclusionary practices in both the reportable and the non-reportable offenses that you would see. And that's even higher at the middle and high school level. So over that period, for that 3-year period, what we saw are still disparities between. Now, you saw some decreases, and again, it's all over the place, where in some grade levels you'll see there's a decrease over time in some of the offenses. And what's not in here is the data that maps to what are these actual offenses. I have a conglomerate list, but not specifically saying that kids are committing this offense more than other offenses. So that was the suspension data. Along with that, on the yellow sheet, whenever you have exclusionary practices, one of the things that the consultants recommended is a lot of training for staff, administrators, and everybody involved. And this is an area, again, where I think we've shown over this time period and continue the most amount of progress. It was at this time that we had some of those strategies. You may remember PBIS, positive behavior in schools. We have VTSS, which is Virginia Tiered System of Supports now put in place. Annually, we do a training administrators with the SROs in the building. So this one really focused on cultural competency and all of the skill sets where you have both administrators and both staff being trained. This also was the introduction to instructional coaches who worked in the classrooms with teachers. There was some work done on courageous leadership. So there is a lot that occurred over that time period when the MAC was actually doing their evaluation. And much of that work still continues today. One of the biggest challenges that we face as a division is even when you train folks, if you have turnover, you have to train folks again. So some of these practices that might have been put in place, if they had not been sustained with training year after year, you might look around and say, wow, the people who are here now aren't the people who were here in 2013-14, and we may need to train again. And that's something that my staff has talked about in terms of how do we have ongoing regular training of things that we feel like are important each and every year for all staff. So that's something that we looked at as well. So again, this is a lot of information, very detailed information that I wanted to kind of set the stage for where we are now, because remember, this is from 2013 to 2017. I arrived in, actually they gave me this report a month after I arrived in 2018, in May of 2018, and since then we've done some things. At the time when this was first started, I think we had 3 schools accredited, and now we're up to 13 schools accredited. So there's been some significant progress that's made, but there's also still some room for some continued growth and some additional strategies that we need to make in terms of moving the needle forward. So I wanted to go through all the documents first, and before I get Dr. Coleman up, just see if there's any questions about anything that you have.
I have a couple of questions and statements, but I guess I could wait for Dr. Coleman to present.
Okay. Do it after that.
Okay. Okay. All righty.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Wanted to report we had some of the information that I would be sharing this evening, of course, has been out on the website and been public for a little while, but we really haven't had an opportunity to present it to the board and to be able to have an opportunity to discuss it, and wanted to try to, as we move forward, I know that the board has been receiving some kind of communications and other pieces of information where we're tying things to our improvement plan and really looking at our strategic plan and kind of how that ties into the plans that we're doing with the schools to get the assistance to our children. And that's kind of how I'm going to approach this a little bit. So I have some general overview, and then gave everyone a handout where we'll kind of walk that through how that gets to a school and gets to kids. So to start with, our strategic plan, our goal is for all schools to be, basically in a nutshell, to be accredited, and then for us to be close our achievement gaps. So that's where our number one priority is with the strategic plan. If you look at as we move forward, this year we've moved up to 13 schools out of the 16. So that's, you can see the trend is for us to keep improving in that situation. So we're quite happy with that, with moving forward. The listing of the schools that have made that full accreditation mark is there, and we've noticed some changes this year with Heritage making it, and then also with Lynchburg Elementary, I believe, have switched over. So that's wonderful, and a lot of great improvement there. Keep in mind also that by making accreditation, you're not only meeting it with the just the overall score and all of your content areas, you're also making significant progress with your gap groups as well. So that's a very positive sign. Of course, we do have 3 schools that we're working with and meeting with those folks and looking at school improvement plans and making our plans for moving forward with R.S. Payne, with Lincoln, and with Sandusky. Was at one of the schools with the team today working on things. So a lot of great work going on there, and very, very confident with the strategies that they're putting in place. If we're looking at specifically with scores, I gave you just the overalls, and then with the rating that goes with them. I did indicate that they always report the highest score possible, so if it does have an asterisk, I did want to note that that's a 3-year average. It doesn't mean that average is very much higher than the current year. It could be a point, and they would report it that way, but they do take that into consideration, that they always look at that and understand that test scores do fluctuate year to year, and that's very normal, for schools to have that. But we've got some great strides with our schools, in moving forward, but are considering what we need to do with that. And then we also have the scores for the middle schools are there, and we see the areas where we need to work. We're concerned, obviously, with the overall and with schools with scores with some of our gap groups and some of our subgroups in those places. So that's a large part of our work right now that we're doing to address those needs. With our high schools, they consider the same scores that we're looking at for the lower schools, but also we have to consider the graduation completion index and also the dropout rate. So those things also need to be in place for schools to be accredited. And we do have those with both schools, so we're quite pleased with that. And you know, in these also, you do have to consider, we do have the writing test to factor in, as well as the reading test scores in those. One thing that does give us concern, and that we're working with you know, VTSS and with our coaches that are in place, also is the chronic absenteeism. You know, we all know as in education, it's difficult to work with children and help them improve if absenteeism is an issue, because if they're not at school, it's difficult to do that. So really, you know, to address that, we're having things in place now to encourage kids to come to school, but also working with the different groups that we have with VTSS and with coaching to look at identifying kids early that maybe are having an issue, and what supports do we need to put in place to help them be more successful in coming to school, or whether there's things that are hindering them from doing that. So that's always important, and we have to factor that in. I'll save questions for the very end, but in front of you, you also have a packet. I'd like to kind of take you through. You know, now we have all this information, we've gotten it back in lots of reports. Well, what do we do with it? So I kind of gave you the cover sheets, the summary of what I just did, that has everything kind of in a nutshell. But in looking at that, you know, we've got the initial goal 1, which is under the strategic plan. And then I followed it through with the second page with what does that look like when we're going into a school improvement plan. So they're looking at closing the achievement gap in reading by reducing the failure rate of black students by 10%. One of the things that we look at is if we're always trying to close our achievement gap every year, and we're taking that in increments, if you continue to do that, you'll close the achievement gap. Rather than looking at an overall score, let's take it in bites. So if you meet that goal each year, not only will you close the achievement gap, but the school will be fully accredited. So that's always where we want to go. That makes that category green. With some practices that are in place, working with some consultants on the literacy plan, word walls, some leveled instruction that's happening, core content areas, and then participating with the lab schools, which are working with the consultants on trying to address how we teach reading in the division. Some of the things that that we're concerned with really is getting into the heads of how kids think about reading. What do you think about while you're reading? The things that affect comprehension. Working with those. You also follow through. There will be essential actions on not only for you know, just the areas of most concern, but things that bother you that you think maybe we're okay at the moment, but we're starting to slide a little bit. So we want to keep an eye on those, and we're really looking at the reading and the math with the weekly and the PLC meetings. Our teachers are meeting in this building on a weekly basis, looking at where kids are, what are we teaching, how are we teaching it, what strategies are we using, and you know, they've got data walls up in the building with the kids up, and how are we moving, and what do they need, and what do we do next, and having very rich conversations about that. And then finally, to the teachers to apply the strategies from book studies and then other PD that's being presented. Some of the things I've worked with my team is really to help them to develop those strategies, and we're also working on ways that we can monitor, so that we've got things where we've adjusted, like say maybe a principal's walkthrough form, so that it captures how often we're seeing things, what we're seeing in the room. Do we need to go back and help people train more when we find that we've got an area that's not what we're hoping? There's a couple of samples in here also of a data wall. This is one that's just beginning. A lot of our data walls now are going digital. I took the kids' names off of it, so you just kind of got the scores reported, but they've got the basic reading levels. That follows through to kind of where we think students fall. All the X's that are on the red, yellow, and green chart were students, and where they fell with that particular assessment. It gets even deeper where we go into the next chart that's red, yellow, and green that has a particular skill that they were learning. In this case, it happened to be a math class, and who has it, who doesn't, and then following that, you go into a lesson plan where you've got small groups, and where the teachers looked at those skills and looked at the things and leveled that. So really trying to figure out exactly what students need, and then following that all the way through and making the changes in the classroom to ensure that kids have what they need to be successful. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to show, was kind of how we take data really from even the division level and then bring it down to the point that it makes a difference in the lives of children.
Question, Dr. Gupta?
A couple of questions. Chronic absenteeism, how do you calculate that? So 19%, that's on average daily basis?
It's based on a student is deemed chronically absent if they miss 10% or more of the school year. So that's 18 days of school. And it doesn't take into account excused absences or not, whether a child's ill or if they're absent from school for any reason, you're deemed chronically absent. So it's the number of kids that go above the 18-day mark.
So the percent reflects the percent of the school.
Right.
Now, on the accreditation report, the sciences were, for the lack of word, marginal, 73, 72%.
Right.
The plan I see is mostly related to English.
Right.
So do you have a similar plan to uplift? Because that's where we can fall off the cliff.
Right.
Could possibly.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the plan for sciences
Well,
to reinforce that area?
Certainly. The plan for doing that is we're currently are conducting academic reviews. We've just done one at one of the schools, and theirs was related to science. So we're really looking at that, looking at how we're planning our lessons, what's being included, is it at the proper level of rigor, what do our assessments look like, and how are we analyzing our data from that. We've also had a group of folks working over the summer and then moving forward as well. We teach our elementary schools in science really out of kits that are kind of hands-on type experiences. All those have been updated, and we've looked at our areas where we're weak and refurbished those and done. We've got one of my staff is doing training with teachers right now on how things have changed and the things we need to do for improvement. So we're really looking at the changes that we need to make that happen as well. All the school improvement plans that they're dipping will have are being added to add science to those areas if it's required.
To add to that, Dr. Gupta, I don't know if you remember when we talked about the academic reviews that we did last year at, I believe, Perrymont and Lincoln. We talked about the science specialist that we have. We have Ann Berry, who is a science specialist who works directly with teachers. And one of the things that we noticed in the science classroom at the elementary level is while they have the kits in the inquiry, if the teacher is setting it up as a demonstration lesson, it has a different effect than if kids are experiencing it at an inquiry level. And shifting that practice to let the kids actually experiment with the hands-on material, make predictions, experience a little bit of failure, make more predictions. So Ann does a great job of working with staff to try to transition that at the elementary level as well.
What I was getting to was using technology. We talked about in finance committee meeting, incorporating like cadavers. They have interactive cadavers nowadays. So more hands-on sciences. Are we heading in that direction for our kids?
Yeah, we definitely are, and we're definitely taking advantage of the online variety that's there. I see that often in the lesson plans where we're looking at their experiments and things you can do when you can't always have access to the other things. There's ways of doing that that's still using the same thought process. You're still using inquiry, and you're being able to participate in a setting that's more digital for that. So that's one of the things that I see am seeing more and more often now when I'm examining lesson plans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very appreciative of the way in which this has been presented to us and the resolution agreement, voluntary agreement. I can see that. my concern is, as has already been ably stated, Dr. Edwards and Dr. Coleman, that we realize that our work continues. And so what I am trying to get a hold of through all of these documents is what is our specific action plan. I see on one document, get reading or something down by 10%. But as the teachers and the staff are new since we started, you all are new. Some of us have been around for a while. And what is the specific plan, and what is it going to look like to make all of these factors work? The accountability, now that the agreement is lifted, what does that look like in terms, and how does the board or how does the community really begin to tackle this? Because we've established that this is as much a community dilemma as it is in our schools. And so compliments to the fine work of all of the documents. And I've been sitting around this table now for 6 years almost. What is the action plan of accountability to address these weaknesses and to actually move us forward? And you have so many moving pieces. That's real. You've trained a staff. They're not here. Now, how do you keep that going? And then how do you deal with every student so that they can have an excellent educational experience to the degree that they need it, whether they're black, white, Asian, Latino, Native American, Pacific Islander, whomever they may be? What does that plan look like?
So can I start with a big picture and then you can fill in the details of it? So thank you for acknowledging the ban has been lifted, but the work didn't go away. So I just need to be clear that yes, the Office of Civil Rights will no longer require us to send them paper, will no longer monitor us, but we are in self-monitoring. And I think one of the things that we did do in putting together our own strategic plan that focuses on student growth, development, and success for all, and it actually calls out marginalized populations and subgroups that have not been performing, is to make sure that the work continues. So the first step is setting the tone and the expectation that comes from me. I set the tone and expectation that that is what we want for all kids, that we want to make sure that kids have access. And I've said this before, access is not good enough if you don't have a support system for success. Access and success are two different things. So I can let you take all of the courses, and I think in some of these reports we'll see where there was access, but we still saw where there was a decrease. So how do I have that access but also provide that support either on the front end or while students are experiencing? It is a plan that you need to be purposeful about doing that. That comes from the staff working with the kids. Staff has to be consistent because, like you said, if I'm trained in this and then I'm no longer here and someone else takes my place. So one of the things that we talked about in our professional development plan is what are those, and you'll see it in this strategic plan, is what are the must-haves? What are the things that no matter when you started working at LCS, this is something that you absolutely have to have. Not just, oh, you missed it in August and we didn't do it, or 2 years ago we did that. We are developing a list of must-haves. One of them is the equity habits in terms of that, along with some good practical strategies that are age appropriate for kids, and setting the expectation that they're must-haves. They're not optional. They're not, they don't just the veterans. It's everybody, the new folks, and so on and so forth. And also a plan of support in terms of what we do with that. One of my favorite sayings is you can't fix what you don't first acknowledge. So putting this out here in the very color-coded documents is a first step of, hey, this is what we look like. This is a reflection in the past of what we look like, and now also looking how different are we now? In 2019, what does our Gov School enrollment look like? Which is something that we're going to work on. What does our Go Center enrollment look like? Have we closed the gaps? And the gaps are kind of difficult, and this is a hard one, because if I want more kids to take AP Psych, I want more kids to take AP Psych. If more black kids take AP Psych, great. But if more white kids also take AP Psych, I haven't closed the gap, but I have more children taking AP Psych or AP History. So I have to be careful about how I look at data and report that data, yes.
Can I speak?
Yes,
What he's heading is, I know you have the steps lined out. Is there a timeline? Like
Everything's in here.
Step 2, 3, 4. So, and that will incorporate that plan. That's what you're asking for.
So the so-called promise plan, which was the language I believe at that time, has collapsed itself into the comprehensive strategic plan.
Yes.
And that is going to have an opportunity for full accountability around these particular matters that we've been monitoring on an ongoing basis.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know, the Promise Plan was the action plan that was put in place after the first letter in 2014 of the work and role. But again, that was limited to Black students, white students, just in advanced coursework, and then the discipline data as well. So this comprehensive strategic plan incorporates some of that and more.
And the timeline piece, and Madam Chair, I will not mention anything else, the timeline piece is in the strategic plan, and that'll be pulled out from time to time for our review.
Yes, absolutely.
And we'll see some of that later.
Yes, you will. You'll see some things to show.
Thank you.
It's on our agenda every meeting for that review. Dr. Brennan.
Just a couple of comments and just one quick question. First of all, I think, Dr. Evers, thank you so much for presenting this information and reviewing all that data. That was a lot to put together. And I think reiterating what you have said and other people have said, the gist of the OCR lifting their ban is the fact that they felt that Lynchburg City Schools was doing what they needed to do to address the issue, and we need to continue to do that. And they mentioned in there a number of items, bringing in consultants, doing different programs, which they really highlighted as that's what they wanted to see happen. So, number one, Lynchburg City Schools has done a lot over the last 5 years to address these issues, and that's one of the reasons that the ban has been lifted, because they know we're on the right track. And I'm sure, just as you said, that's going to continue. As far as the school accreditation results, I know that Dr. Coleman said this, but I just want to say this again, that Lynchburg City Schools has gone from having 3 schools accredited to 13 schools accredited in 5 years. And for the community and for our other supporters of Lynchburg City Schools, we want everyone to know that, because that's a huge accomplishment by our staff and by our teachers. It's a huge thing to have done. And a special shout out on this occasion to Mrs. Leah Gray at Lincoln Middle School, who hadn't been accredited in 5 years, and they were the ones that got accredited this year. So it's been a huge help, huge amount of work. Usually in the past we've sat around this table gnashing our teeth and wringing our hands, but this is really great results, and I think we're on the right track. So having said those things, I have one question, Dr. Coleman, which is that when we look at the chart for elementary schools, when you look at R.S. Payne, which was accredited with conditions, their numbers as far as their results were pretty good. 80%, 83%, 79%.
Right.
And I know it's a more complicated definition now, but can you help us with that as far as why were they not accredited, and where do we go from there with R.S. Payne?
Right. They missed accreditation because of the performance of their subgroups. So they missed because of the performance of, if you have more than 2 subgroups in the red category, then you miss accreditation because of that. And I believe theirs was because of Black and economically disadvantaged. I'd have to double check that, but I remember they're red in English.
Okay.
So we're doing, that's what we're working with them, and have an academic review plan coming up in less than a week.
Right.
There to work on those areas.
So even though you pass with
The
your
overall.
overall scores, as you look into the different groups, that's where you can
Right,
be dinged as far as your accreditation goes.
right. You have to have it, and that's one of the things we talked about, where they're considering that now with all the subgroups, that to make it, you have to make it across the board.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation.
Can I just add one thing too, that when you said it, I thought about it when you said the ban has been lifted by the OCR, and I see some folks out here, and actually on the agenda tonight, you're approving the 20 members of the Equity Task Force. We have our own internal accountability system. So, and those of you who have been to an equity task force meeting know that they are probably tougher on us than the OCR is, but also doing the great work to make sure that we don't slip and that we do keep the focus on all children as our primary focus. Equity Task Force, I believe, is meeting next week, and one of the things that we'd like to do with them, because this is probably the first time that they're actually hearing anything on closure regarding some of the things that many of them have been around for a while, so they know this stuff better than I do, is to share this information with them in a little bit more detail, and to work with them as we continue to try to close those gaps and also increase the number of students participating in programs and reduce exclusionary practice disparities.
Ms. Carter?
Oh, I did want to say that I misspoke. It was the subgroup for RS Payne was black students and students with disabilities.
Thank
I pulled the report and looked.
Ms. Carter?
The slide that had accredited schools, there was S.F.I beside some of the schools, and what does that stand for?
Schools for Innovation.
Okay. The other thing is, also with making some of the changes that the OCR talks about and that we want to do, is sometimes it's also changing the teacher's perspective on some of the students that come to the class. The counselors can refer and the students can try, but a child knows whether or not they're wanted, and some teachers are bold enough to say, "What are you doing here?"
Well, hopefully they're not Lynchburg
And
City
that's
Schools
not
teachers saying
something
that
that,
here.
or why were you here? And even to the point of, talking with the counselors as to, well, we don't know why you're here anyway. So hopefully that's being addressed. And the other one is, I've always had concerns with the non-reportable referrals. And can you explain what those are? So
those are things that would be like in a classroom, that things that wouldn't go to the police. So I'm disrespectful, and I won't listen. I won't sit down, and you have to actually send me to the principal's office or write a referral for me, but it's not a referral that's being reported. It's not a fight, it's not drugs or weapons or anything like that. Those kinds of things are the things that we're seeing.
and those are the kind that I see are so subjective. And I always wanted to know, we need to, what is, or like you're being, the disrespectful one is the one that really I have some concerns with sometimes. The other one is the absenteeism. How much does that weigh now in this new configuration of accreditation?
It's high.
And it seems like now I hear this with some of the students with that have major health problems, and what I'm hearing you say is an absence is an absence, whether it's excused or not.
Right.
So,
well, what we're trying to do, we're working with our students, so there's absenteeism for the purpose of the reporting, the accreditation, and what we have to do, and that's where absent is absent. Then there's absenteeism, but we don't want you to fall behind. We still want to make sure kids have access to the work that they miss, the support that they may need, and that part is in our control. So numerically, we may not be able to do too much in terms of fitting in the state formula, but our ultimate goal is student success. So if I have a student, let's say I have a student with Lyme's disease who's in and out, my ultimate goal is to make sure that that student is successful while in and out, which we definitely can do. You saw our campaign on Don't Sleep on School. The other thing is trying to discourage, vacations and just missing school during the school year as much as possible, because the more kids are here and the more that they're engaged, the higher the probability that they will be successful.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Madam Chair, could you please excuse me so that I would not have lied a couple of seconds ago saying I wasn't going to say anything else. But I just want to say this briefly. I'm very proud of the staff we have now at the admin level. And I just want to say this is hard stuff. And it's very delicate and it's very sensitive. I just want to encourage all of us in the LCS family to not ever take anything personal in relationship to taking it personal. but that we're doing this for the kids. And all of us are giving our very best that we can. And if we remember that always, that we're doing it for the kids, and just take a deep breath if something is being asked that may appear to be challenging your area, that it's going to be all right because we're doing this for the kids that will make our future what we want it to be.
Thank you both very much for this information. I know that after we spend some time looking at it, there may be some additional questions. If you would submit those to Crystal, and she will do what she did with the other questions, which is a good system. Great. Thank you. This now moves us to public comment section of our meeting, and we have quite a few. In accordance with policy BDDH, public participation, the school board welcomes requests and comments as established in the guidelines within that policy. Individuals who wish to speak before the school board shall have an opportunity to do so at this time. Persons appearing before the school board will not be allowed to campaign for public office or promote private business ventures and should not use profanity or vulgar language, gestures, make comments about a public official or an employee that are not related to his or her official duties, engage in behavior that disrupts the meeting or intimidates others, or address the school board on issues that do not concern the services, policy, role, and or responsibility of the school board. Individual speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes. A speaker representing a group shall limit his comments to 5 minutes. The representative shall identify the group at the beginning of his or her presentation. A group may have no more than one spokesperson. The total allotted time for public comments at school board meetings is 30 minutes. Public comments are reserved for the public to provide input. The board does not respond to comments, answer questions, or otherwise engage in discussion at this time. The first speaker is Ken Berger.
Mrs. Morrison, Chair, Dr. Coleman, Vice Chair, members of the school board, Dr. Edwards, Superintendent, I thank you for your service, your dedication to the children of this community, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I am Ken Berger. I'm an ordained minister with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and retired as the Executive Director of Independent Living at the Summit a few years ago. You may already know that I do not reside in the city of Lynchburg, but I worked in the city of Lynchburg until my retirement, and I continue to worship, I continue to shop, I continue to dine, I continue to volunteer, I continue to socialize in Lynchburg and call Lynchburg my circle. I wish to encourage you to continue what I've been observing so far this evening. You have exhibited a dedication to continuous improvement, always taking the next step, holding each other accountable, and moving yourselves forward for the good of your students. This evening, my focus is on the safety of those who identify themselves as members of the LGBTQ+ community. I understand that your written policies regarding discrimination based on gender identification and sexual orientation may not completely include protection for these students. We already know that LGBTQ youth are twice as likely as their peers to have been physically assaulted, and according to the results of a survey of the Human Rights Campaign, 92% of LGBTQ students say they hear negative messages about being LGBTQ. Their top source for those comments includes their school. My parents enrolled me in first grade when I was 5 and a half, and I never have figured out if that's because they wanted me out of the house or they thought I was smart enough, or maybe some balance in there. But that made me the youngest in my class and often the smallest, and thank God only occasionally the result of some bullying. I remember one day after school when my friends followed me and they surrounded me when the older and larger student came to me and they said, "You'll have to take us all on if you want to get to Ken." They protected me and the bullying stopped. I do not know what it is like to be a member of the LGBTQ community, but I do know what it is like to be physically, mentally, and emotionally assaulted. It falls, I believe, upon your responsibility to do everything in your power to protect the safety of all of the members of the Lynchburg City School community, especially the students at such vulnerable ages. It's my understanding that the Virginia School Board currently has an anti-bullying campaign, and I trust you support that. I also trust that you will take every appropriate action to protect the safety of every student. I thank you for your time, I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for your dedication.
Our next speaker is B.B. Shavers.
Good afternoon. I'm speaking for the group Dawn to Dusk program in Chapo Nation. Chapo Nation Dawn to Dusk program is a before and after school program in James Crossing, realizing that Lynchburg's poverty level, 24.8%, is higher than the national average, 13.9%, and that James Crossing has an even higher concentration of poverty. Dawn to Dusk provides the people skills and resources to change the mindset and so change the lifestyle to move out of poverty. The program runs each school day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 55 to 70 children a day are impacted before and after school, along with outreach to adults during the school time. The program provides food and hygiene training so children have the foundation to go with confidence and without shame into the school day. Character and positive living habits are taught and modeled daily by staff volunteers and through involving the children in team sports, which we was able to raise $1,800 for 12 kids to be cheerleaders and football players at RS Payne. Dawn to Dusk seeks to instill the mindset of a lifelong learner through homework help and activities to engage and inspire interest in math, reading, science, and history. Current events are discussed and education provided on how to engage in the community in positive ways. Speaking of what Dr. Cole was saying, realizing that lasting impact in a child's life endures only if reinforced at home. Dawn to Dusk models and teaches adults the same character and positive living habits that children learn through GED and job skill-related sources, life skills, and certifications. Since the program has been running, a level of respect for self and others in developing children can go to school without the fear of being bullied due to clothes or hygiene. They are less likely to act out since they go to school having had breakfast. The Lynchburg City Police Department has also noticed an 18% decrease in the crime rate in James Cross community that really makes a difference. We would like to continue this impactful program and are seeking support for supplies, equipment, and overhead. Would you consider partnering with us to change the mindset, thus to change the lifestyle? If you have any questions or would like to know specific needs projects, feel free to call me, Mr. B.B. Shavers, 202-893-1950. Chapo Nation Dawn to Dusk program and after school program is part of the All People's Ministry, which is an exempt organization described under Section 501c3. One of the things we've been able to do with our program is, I think he was talking about truancy and kids being late. At Sandusky Middle School, just so happened this morning, one of the things we do with this program, any kid that's in James Crossing or throughout the city for that matter, if you're in James Crossing, if you missed the bus, you can call Mr. Beebe, I'll come pick you up. If you just open to happen to have 4 or 5 different kids inside your home that you got to get ready to go to school, and just so happened one day, like this morning, one didn't have their pants. So I had to make sure 2 other kids get to school and come back and get the 3rd. Because we make sure each one of these kids just in James Crossing, their school is a better chance that they have an opportunity to be more successful. Therefore, we had an opportunity to partner with Central Health. Mr. Tim Schoolmaker is a great guy. He gave us the opportunity with the Dawn to Dusk program to go to him and say, hey, listen, what I noticed in the last 7 years of working inside the Lynchburg City with these kids is that most of the challenges you have to the kids in school is lack of food. Most of the kids that you go to school, the ones that we eat properly, if you go to school, they're normally ones that's in class, they're first and already ready to say, hey, at front. The ones that don't for the last few years before we started this program was the ones that normally show up at Heritage Elementary, at Sandusky Middle, at these schools that's lacking behind. Instead of these kids being first in class to say, hey, I want to learn today, they're still in the cafeteria. So now when they come to class late, guess what? Now they lack. Now the teachers can't do their job, and they're interrupting class. So one thing this program had a chance to do the last 3 years is curb that. We have been all the way down to building positive relationship with bus drivers, because we understand, as Dr. Evans always say, the first contact with any kid at Lynchburg City School is through the bus drivers. We had instances that over in this community that you had two or three bus drivers that almost feared for their life coming into these communities. Why? Because they didn't have the respect of the parents. Through this program and engagement of us working together, now we got these same bus drivers coming to these same parents are the ones giving the bus drivers the snacks. So you got the same parents that was fighting 2 years ago now coming back giving, hey, we love you, Mr. Bus Driver. Why? Because you're getting our kids to schools in a positive way. Now, this program is offered to everybody. We're working with Danville, we're working with Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania and other places. But I'm an EC Glass graduate. Lynchburg City is my home. This is the most important thing. These kids are here, like you said, it's about the kids. These here kids are more important than me anywhere else in the nation. And I would really appreciate if we could sit there and have a positive conversation to make this continue to work inside our school system. Thank you, guys.
Caitlin Lloyd.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Lloyd, and I am a second-year student at the University of Lynchburg. I'm currently working towards my bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in gender studies, and I am also a member of the LGBTQ community. I am here today to propose adding sexual orientation and gender identity to your non-discrimination policies. To begin, I think it is necessary to revise the Lynchburg City Schools website so that policies are consistent across the board. When searching for pre-existing non-discrimination policies, it was difficult to navigate the site and find the information I needed for this presentation. So I think fixing this issue will not only help faculty, staff, and parents, but also the students to whom the policies apply. What I did find, however, was that Policy AC states that the Lynchburg City School Board is committed to non-discrimination with regard to sex, gender, or any other characteristic protected by law. Similar statements are found in Policy JBZ, but in the state of Virginia, there are no explicit laws protecting against discrimination based upon sexual orientation or gender identity. I am here to assure you that there is a great need for such protections. Studies have shown that students perform better academically if they feel comfortable at school. This means arriving every day without the fear of being harassed or bullied because of who they are. They must know that their schools will protect them from harm. Middle and high school students in the LGBTQ community especially are at a greater risk than their heterosexual and cisgender peers for suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, as well as higher absences from school if they face discrimination based upon being LGBTQ. All students, no matter what their background may be, have a right to a dignified and safe educational experience. They have a right to not be afraid to go to school and to have policies in place that can help prevent them feeling that way. After all, for many students, school may be the only place they feel they have value or safety. Having policies in place to prevent discrimination based upon sexual orientation and gender identity directly tells students that their schools care about their well-being and their education, which can lead to better mental health and higher academic performance overall. Adolescence is an awkward and difficult enough time without discrimination standing in the way. I know you care about your students, or you wouldn't be here trying to help them in any way you could. All I ask is that you consider this consistency in policy and addition of sexual orientation and gender identity for the betterment of your schools, your students, and your community. Thank you.
Robert Flood.
He had to leave. He took himself off.
Andrew Montgomery.
Thank you very much this evening. My name's Andrew Montgomery. I'm a graduate of Heritage High School. I'm a local artist. I have a daughter in 3rd grade at Bedford Hills Elementary School. I've been active as a school reader and a participant in the Watchdogs program since she's been there in the last year and a half. This year I'd made some more plans before school had started to participate in more programs. I really enjoy it. School needs dads. Now, however, I'm no longer allowed to participate in any of these volunteer programs. I have a 20-year-old nonviolent felony that had, I've been told, been missed in the past by background checks. Apparently, I was never allowed to volunteer in the school system. And a new background check company has done a more thorough job of finding what was in the past supposed to have been found. I am not alone. I know this. I've spoken to the deputy superintendent enough to know there are other parents in my position. How many, I don't know. The school system is in need of active male role models. In the past year and a half, I have been in the school over 40 times in a volunteer position. There are constant emails and letters that come home begging for more parents, especially fathers, to be involved. Not only are you keeping a number of capable and willing parents out of the schools, now you have removed parents that have been active and made an impact already. Parents that now have to explain to their children and their school administrators why they are no longer allowed to participate in these volunteer programs. My children and my teachers do not need to know about my criminal history. It is in the past. I don't have an answer as to what should change. It is necessary to draw a line as to who we allow in our schools. But to gather all felons under the same umbrella of treatment, it seems unnecessary. Something needs to change to allow us to either participate for the first time in our schools or to return to our schools. Thanks very much, and I appreciate your time.
Carl Potter? Did I say that right?
Yes, Potter. First, I want to thank y'all for having the opportunity to come before the board. My name is Carl Potter. I'm an employee of Lynchburg City Schools. To Dr. Edwards in the school board, I said, good evening. I got three concerns for the board members tonight. Is for me personally, I'm a delivery driver for food from schools that don't prepare food. And so my concern is for the summer program that they have around the city. I'm a 12-month employee, but when the school ends at the fiscal year, I have to get off my delivery truck and go on the grounds crew to prepare, the grounds and everything. And the people that's on 10-month contract, they take my job, I think, and they do that job for 10 weeks where I'll be off the truck. And basically my concern is that when they take me off the truck and they put that 10-month employee on the truck, they pay them on top of the scale where the delivery driver and groundsman located. So I asked the question, why can't I continue to drive delivery truck? Because basically I'm doing the same job. But the truck that I have is like, I take care of it, wash it, do everything you can to keep it nice and neat appearance for the school. But when they get in, all they do is drive, don't check the oil, do anything. But the main concern is, why can't I continue to drive the truck? But this has been addressed with Dr. Edwards and some more school board members, but I'm not satisfied with the answer. That's why I'm here tonight to vocal my personal opinion on that. Because if I'm a 12-month employee and they're a 10-month employee, and they got the same right to become a 12-month employee also. So why should they take my job away from me and create it for someone else because they're on 10 months and pay them a higher salary than what I make? And I go to all the schools in the city of Lynchburg, and I'm a professional driver. I got my license CDL. The guy that took my place this past summer, I had to show him how to operate the truck that I drive for the entire school year. And so That's the first concern, is the pay scale, why they take me off my truck and get someone to pay them more. And the second concern, I work for the ground crew. I'm representing them also tonight. I don't think in them up here, because those ground crew guys, they're on the same pay scale that the delivery driver on. And y'all can look around the community as far as the Lynchburg City Schools. You see what we have to do. You remember that storm that came through here real bad? We had to come in, chip, cut wood, sow grass, do everything you imagine you can do. But they want me to tell to tonight that the responsibility given to them, we had to work in the heat, 90-degree plus weather, then the cold condition coming up, pushing snow, shoveling snow, then if the tree fall down, if when the school call us, we have to be there to cut the tree up, move it in a expedite manner. And the last one concern is, I put in a job. I shared it with Dr. Edwards. I put in for a job, a transfer, whatever you want to call it. The job was posted, and the guy that left gave his 2-week notice, and the job was taken off the web, and the guy came back to the same job without anybody to fill out, the resume to take that job. And I don't think that's right, because I know how things work in politics, but it's a proper way to do everything, because that was not a proper way they done that job. Because I put in for that job, they should at least went through the process of interviewing. If we didn't qualify, then brought that guy back into that job. But last but not least, I thank y'all for listening to me, but the guys from the ground crew, none of them could be here tonight, but they want me to speak for them, because you all look at that classification of the pay schedule on that and see where we fall. We fall not at the high tier with the experience and knowledge that we do have to operate all these type of equipment in the Lynchburg City School maintenance department. Y'all done seen many people come down here to this building. We have to move furniture, move kitchen appliances. We have to do it all. But I think we should be compensated for a wage adjustment, because if you look at that tier, we should be, if we qualified and can do these jobs, we should be able to be at the top of that tier with no problem, no question asked. But right now, I turn it back over to the board, and board, y'all take real consideration of looking at that job adjustment again, because we have fine, qualified guys out on the ground crew, delivery drivers. And so, with my personal thought, I think y'all should, give us a wage adjustment accordingly to our job responsibility. And I thank you for your time.
That brings us to our last speaker, Mr. Lewis.
Busy night tonight. So good evening once again to each of you, and let me start as always by thanking you for your service to the students and the staff of Lynchburg City Schools, as well as the greater Lynchburg community. I am Lynchburg Education President Carl Luce, and when I addressed this group in September about student discipline in Lynchburg City Schools, it seemed to have surprised a few people. Some people heard me more than others. Some people, quite frankly, believed me more than others. And then a highly publicized incident took place at EC Glass. There are those who have stated publicly that these events were vastly overblown, and those people may well be right. Maybe it was overblown, but it wasn't surprising. How could it be? When a month earlier, I, a teacher with more than 25 years of experience in this division, working with this staff, working with these kids, my kids, working in this community, stood right here and told you what was going on. Maybe some data will help. Let's talk about those Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions we hear so much about. I have a packet of information with me today, 17 pages of data. It discusses the behaviors teachers have had to deal with: defiance, aggression, throwing objects, taunting peers, destroying property, hitting a teacher multiple times, hitting another student multiple times, throwing objects at a teacher, standing on desks, flipping over chairs, attempting to run out of the building, telling staff to shut up, telling staff they're stupid, and refusal to go to class. It talks about the behavior support plan, behavior statements, planning support sheets, functions of behaviors, logs tracking behavior by 15-minute blocks of time, quiet time interventions, chill zone interventions, multiple parent meetings, and 5 referrals to the office. Does it surprise you that your students behave this way? Would it surprise you that all of this occurred in the first 20 days of the school year? Would it surprise you that all of this data came from just one teacher? Would it surprise you that all of this data is about one student? Would it surprise you that that one student is in kindergarten? How many interventions and how much paperwork has this teacher had to compile on her class as a whole? How many hours has she had to devote to behavior that she could use to plan, to grade, or to rest? How many times has this teacher been hit, punched, or scratched this year? Would it surprise you that she's not alone? There are stories like this in every building, at every site across the division. It's happening in pre-K, it's happening in high school. It's happening on the buses, and it's happening in the cafeterias. It's happening in the gyms, and it's happening in the hallways. Would it surprise you to know that nearly all of the teachers in one department at one of your high schools have already begun looking for other jobs? Imagine that, losing an entire department. Would it surprise you to know that your employees are frightened for their own safety? Imagine how your students feel. The problem of poor student behavior is there, and quite honestly, there are a wide range of factors responsible for it. But for our purposes, the only question we need to answer is, what do we do now? Right now, your employees are exhausted, they are scared, they are frustrated, they are angry. But they are determined, they are resourceful, they are patient, they are knowledgeable, they are invested in the success of their students. But they need your support. We need to give Alternative Education Director LaTanya Brown the support she needs. We need to reinvigorate the successful Middle School Learning Center, which not only held students accountable for their actions, but taught them how to be successful when they returned to a regular school setting. We need to invest in an elementary program where we can utilize an alternative setting that would allow students to develop good social, emotional, and academic skills so that we don't need alternative placements at the secondary level. We need to make better use of our Empowerment Academy space with morning and afternoon programs that could double the capacity of the academy. We need all of our alternative programs not only to understand the needs of our most challenging students and to prepare them for success in a traditional learning environment, but also hold them accountable for those behaviors. We need in-school alternative programs not only to be punitive, but also to be effective in helping students learn the proper ways to handle regular school situations. We need every one of you and everyone who works in this building to come into the schools. I don't mean for a program, I don't mean for a lunch. I mean you need to shadow a school employee for a day. You need to see these behaviors. You need to see the expectations and the programs handed down to your staff, how they actually work in the classroom, in the cafeteria, and on the buses. We have creative principals and on-site supervisors who are doing all they can with Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions, but they need a viable Tier 3 plan. They have a lot of great ideas. Listen to them. Implement them. Let them create a culture of success for LCS. Otherwise, we won't remember the incident at EC Glass as this big event. We'll remember it as the tip of the iceberg. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That now takes us to the finance report.
So Kim is not here tonight, but I will take you through the finance report. On the agenda sheet, you can see for the first 3 months, we have about 25% of our revenue. And I think Kim did a great job of explaining how the revenue comes in. All of it doesn't come in at the beginning of the year, so we have a better understanding about that. She also noted the health insurance payable balance for September, so we're leveling a little bit. It was ticking up a little bit, but looks to be a little bit better than that. There was nothing on the revenue or the expenditure report that I noted worth commenting on, unless you have some questions specific to that.
After
Okay.
they have questions, they can always submit.
Oh, yep. Absolutely.
This was for information only. That now moves us to the consent agenda. And I recommend the approval of the amended consent agenda, which includes the school board meeting minutes, October 1st, 2019, the work session minutes, September 17th, 2019, student discipline committee meeting, October the 8th, 2019, and the amended personnel report. Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Carter, is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Brennan? Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you. All right, oh, good. Good part of the evening, student representative comments. We're going to start tonight with Ms. Murata from EC Glass High School.
Hello, how are you guys? Oh, sure. I just have this. Here's a cheat sheet, so I don't have to stare back at the wall the entire time. All right, so I'm back again. This time, I guess it's the November, sort of October edition. It's mostly stuff from October, but yeah, so I'm a 12th grade student at EC Glass, as you guys already know. There's my email, and if anybody wants it, let me know. I'd be more than happy to give it to you. So do you guys want me to leave it there for a second, or all right. Oh, that's an option too? I mean, whatever way you guys want to contact me, I'd love to talk. So anyway, there are a few things. It's similar to last time. I tried to put it into different categories. So we have the sports, the arts, EC Glass in the community, and also just like a general what's going on with the school. So first off, we have the sports stuff. Actually, literally just today, the cross-country players were leaving to go to Pulaski County to go run in the regional meet there. I have a few friends that are in cross-country. One of them, I think actually last night they were doing a carb loading event or something was going on, make sure they're at their best for this event. So they're very excited about this today. And if they do well, they'll actually get to go on the state. So I hope the best for them. I have not heard back, but I'll probably figure out something by tomorrow. Also, our field hockey and volleyball seasons, just like most of the fall sports, are kind of coming to an end now as we're getting to the end of the fall season. The field hockey team has been, I feel like they've been getting better each year, which is something nice to see. They have a really good coach, and the volleyball team has also done pretty well. They've been 11-8, and they actually last night they won their the first game of the playoffs against Salem, I believe. So that was pretty cool to see, and I wish them the best of luck against JF. Football, so that's the big thing right now. Last Friday we had a pretty big game for Glass. It was also a pretty big disappointment. So yeah, but beyond the Heritage game, Glass has been doing really good all season, and I think they're looking forward to playoffs, seeing where that'll take them. Also, the guy from ABC 13, I thought that was really cool. Heritage and Glass both came together and gave him a shirt, which was really neat. There are some other pictures from the season since my last presentation. So you can see everybody is in the EC Glass spirit as we go on with our football season. So now we move on to the arts. Glass is Drama Club recently went to VTA, which is pretty much, I'd say, the biggest theater conference in Virginia. And they took their show there called The Elephant's Graveyard, which actually, if you want to see it, it will be that along with, I've heard another act, So We Can Dance, which I guess is a dance showcase. That'll be the 14th to the 16th of November at the EC Glass Alumni Theater. So get to be nice up close and personal and see the show that they did well in. So they took it. They won a few awards. They got an honorable mention in costuming, which I've seen the costumes for this show, and they look really cool. Third place in the Technical Olympics, so that's really awesome to see as well. there's a lot of work behind the scenes to make these shows come on, so the tech people definitely brought it together with the Tech Olympics. Wyatt Moore was the VTA All-Star, and Claire Harvey, I know she's been writing plays herself. Over the last few years, she won 3rd place in the one-act playwriting contest, which is really cool too. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the storm drains at Glass, but they look a little bit different now. Ms. Gibson McDonald has been working with her class, and actually with a partnership with the Lynchburg Water Resources Department to actually raise awareness over the fact when we throw water down our when we throw trash in our storm drains, that goes somewhere. And so this is kind of trying to raise awareness for that, and I think it's a really cool way to do it, and kind of make Glass seem like a more lively place, which is really awesome too. Actually, today when I was walking into school, they were cleaning off these, and I'm guessing they were getting ready to put some stuff on it to make it a little bit more permanent, but they're definitely taking care of it. But yeah, and I think it's also important to note that Ms. Gibson McDonald basically let her class take charge in this. She just kind of let them go with what they wanted to do, and she supported them through the way, and I think they made some really awesome creations here. So, EC Glass and the community. EC Glass, there was an election yesterday. We didn't have school, but that also gave a lot of people the opportunity to vote. I voted for the first time yesterday, which was really cool. Gave me a little bit of PTSD with the Scantrons, but it was really cool. And I got to walk in, I got to cast my ballot, and that was a really cool experience. And a lot of my friends too have also been doing the same. So it's really nice to see that a lot of the people at Glass are going out to vote and care about that. Also, Mr. Matthews is the government teacher at EC Glass. He's been working really hard leading up to this election. He's done a lot of really cool stuff. And there is some pictures from when Ben Klein actually came to visit and talk to the students. He's been working really hard to get as many candidates as he can come in, and he did a pretty good job at that. He got Ben Klein, like I said, David Zillis, Wendell Walker, Jennifer Woofter. There's a lot of people coming in. It's really cool to have the experience to actually talk with these people that are either already in office or running again, and get a better idea of what they represent beyond just the website that they put out to campaign each year. So I thought that that's really awesome. He's put a lot of hard work into that, so I just kind of wanted to, say thanks for that. Also reading to the elementary schoolers, found out that some of our football players actually went to R.S. Payne and read to the elementary schoolers there. Tyler Page and Jaden Merriman, I know them okay. I've seen them a few times. They're both really awesome dudes, though, and I think it's really cool to see that they're taking time to go read to the kids and make a better connection with our community. Also, Evening for Africa, that's coming up. Also, I wanted to point out, Glass was actually collecting books for the book sale that we do. Today we counted the books, and I think there's over 2,000 books collected for that, which is really awesome. 2 of the 7th period classes got in a pretty big competition over that. So it's awesome to see that Glass is working towards good causes, and Eating for Africa is a pretty big event we put on each year, and it's really cool that we're working for that. If you guys want to come check it out, it's November 7th. It takes place from 6 to 8 p.m. and you can go check it out. There's a lot of different places. EC Glass Culinary Arts is actually going to be making some food for it, and we'll have music and stuff, and it'll be a really cool event. In the past, I think they made a pretty decent amount of money for the Boys and Girls Club and their sister school in Nairobi. So yeah, if you have time, I definitely recommend you check it out. What's going on? Senior Bonfire was Monday night. I believe, yes, sorry, this week is just, things are coming together. But anyway, it's part of senior dues, so as long as you pay those, you get in. In our government classes, we got our wristbands to get into that, and it was a pretty big fire. I think it was actually quite a bit bigger than the one we have in the picture there. But also another big part of this event is that we get to pie a teacher in the face. So a little bit earlier this year, we voted on that, and Mr. Matthews, Mr. Mboden, Ms. Eubank, and Coach Ernuska were the lucky ones chosen to be pied. And actually, it was Mr. Matthews' birthday, too. So, got a nice little present there. Also, another really cool thing Glass has been helping out with. I don't know if you guys saw the Jug Bowl live stream, and there's actually a live stream before that, but that's actually mostly run by the students. I don't know if Austin Journey's here, but he has been really awesome about kind of leading us and helping us through. There aren't a lot of people who would be willing to give up a Friday night to kind of help run a live stream for the local school district. So he's been really awesome. And if you guys have not seen the video, there will be a little clip. But those are some statistics for the Jug Bowl stream. It was really cool as we saw those numbers rise because those are some pretty big numbers. So it was neat. And also 40% of the views came from outside of Virginia. So likely we're guessing that this is alumni. But it's really cool to see that, you know, people actually want to see the game, and this was a way they got to see it. So those are some of the stats there. You know, a big one is 4,200 views during the stream. That's pretty significant, but overall, you know, it was a pretty successful stream. And actually on the next slide here, I believe I have a small clip from it.
Rushing leader for Easy West, Rayshawn Kendrick, taking it around 15 to 20 yards after.
And so actually I was running the camera for the second part of that video, but as you can tell, he actually faked me out too there. So he's a really good player. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And also another thing that I'm taking part of with 7 other EC Glass students is Combat Robots project at Vector Space. You know, what's cooler than fighting robots? So we've been having a lot of fun with that. It's been a challenge throughout, you know, but I've definitely learned a lot. And if you guys have time, the actual competition will be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at VES. So definitely feel free to check that out and see all our hard work. And this is the video from last time that I could not get to work. So.
Hi, my name is Isabel Unby and I play Emily Webb.
Hi, I'm Needy Encore and I'm head of recruitment. My name is Ian Price and I'll be playing Dawkins.
And I play Howie Dixon. Hi, and I like Well, I lived in Lynchburg my time. 12 years.
I've lived in Lynchburg for 5 years.
I've lived in Lynchburg for about 3 years.
I have lived in Lynchburg for 14 years. I lived in Lynchburg for all my life.
My favorite part about Lynchburg is the historical aspect, but I also really like the people because they're really welcoming.
My favorite part is I guess the fast food restaurants and other part of being out with friends.
My favorite part about Lynchburg is how small it is and how everything's so close together. I could walk practically anywhere.
Probably the people and the things that you can do with events.
The people I do see are pretty nice.
I've met a lot of extraordinarily nice people here.
All right, and that is all I have.
Thank you. Welcome, Taylor McClure tonight. It's her first meeting, so thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing what's going on at Heritage.
My name is Taylor McClure, and I'm a senior at Heritage, and this is a recap of everything that went on in October. So all of October, we were stressing of preventing bullying And on October 23rd, we all wore orange to show like that we care about preventing bullying as a unity of the school. We had FAFSA night as well as Glass had a FAFSA night on October 7th and 8th in order to help the senior class fill out their FAFSA forms and help with financial aid. Our student athletes, Alasia and Victoria, were invited to talk on the radio about volleyball, track, and their academics. That was pretty cool. Varsity volleyball had quite a few seniors for their senior night. We didn't win, but it was a good game, and their JV team is doing good. Katie Baker is a new counselor at Heritage, and she got to present about the power of post. It is at the VSBA conference. Luke Richards set a new school record at the millstat.com Invitational 5K. Our AP Environmental Science group got a field trip to go on the James River to test the water quality, and I went on that trip last year, and it was a fun trip. We canoed all around the James River, and then we stopped, tested the water, and then it was a fun experience. Our culinary art program won for the second time, and at the Top Chef Challenge, we beat quite a few organizations. Can't see them all. We had a meeting hosted by Coach Meadows in our library, and he talked about the fun little things we have in our media center, like the doodle pen, the Cricut, the 3D printer. It rained on the day we were supposed to do the big feet meet, so instead of just canceling it, we did it in our gym, and that was pretty cool. We did a clap out on our hallway as we cheered them on before they went into the gym. Oh, I think I skipped something. Yeah, the Jug Bowl. Both teams did really good, but it came down and we got the victory. And it was really cool how we got the custom jersey for Dennis. What is this? Yeah. We're undefeated except for the very first game against Vance, but we're doing really well, and it's a good season. Our JROTC got first place for the fastest team time at the J.R. Tucker biathlon, and Ian Garland got third for the fastest individual time. Our Pioneer Theater, Harris Erickson, won the acting scholarship from VTA. The tech team placed first in the Tech Olympics, and the improv team made it to the top. And that is it.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear so many things are going on, and gave us a few activities to look at about. Hope we can get to some of them. Thank you. That now takes us to our school board committee report. Is there a report from the finance committee?
We met in October, and I think we talked about some of the items you'll be seeing on the agenda tonight.
Okay. Thank you. There was no governor's school meeting. You did meet?
Although we did not have a governor's school meeting, we did have a Gov School review. And one thing that I would share with the group is there were a lot of positive comments about our Gov School from many of the superintendents. So I was really
really proud of that effort that the Gov School does.
Great, thank you. Ms. Carter, anything from Laurel?
No.
Anything from the STEM Academy?
No, there's no meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Brennan. Legislative Advocacy Committee, Dr. Brennan?
So just briefly, we're going to talk later on in the agenda about our legislative items, so we'll talk about that later. But just as a reminder, this Friday, November the 8th at 9 a.m., we're going to have, we've invited state legislators to come for a Take Your Legislator Out to Breakfast gathering. And we've had a very good turnout. We're going to have a number of state legislators or representatives of their offices as well as city council there. Christy has handed out to you a setup of the itinerary. It's going to be 9 to 11, really probably 9 to 10:30 with a program, and then 10:30 to 11, the legislators can visit the school, like to visit the school. So we hope everyone will come and be friendly to all our state legislators, and we're all looking forward to that. And then we also briefly talked about Adopt a School, which is now in place, and everyone has their representative. We thank you very much, everyone, for sending emails and keeping us updated on our school's activities.
That's great. Thank you. Advisory Committee to the School Board.
I do not think we have a report from CTE, do we? Or Brad? Oh, there he is. Okay. You're coming up. Okay. Didn't see you there. Sorry, sir.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Edwards. The Career and Technical Education Advisory Committee met on October 22nd. 12 members were present at the meeting. As with most meetings, there were, of course, an abundance of reports. We had a STEM Academy report, the CVCC reported on their G3 initiative and their Title III grant. I got to report that there are 6 new career and technical teachers in the division, and I also reported on the federal program monitoring that will take place for CTE in February. We'll have visitors here in February. Now, here's the good part. I'm really excited about a committee that is formed for internships. We have a committee that's formed. It consists of 2 teachers, 1 at each high school, and 3 local professionals. The local professionals are, I'll just name them, Matt Pillow from Wiley Wilson, Jackie Stevens from Framatome, and Jason, what's Jason's last name? Gilbert of Centra. Jason Gilbert from Centra is not a healthcare professional, he's an IT professional. Now, not to say that one internship is better than the next, but this committee is going to focus on the STEM area. So if you're taking a cybersecurity class or an architectural drawing class or an engineering class, they're going to focus on trying to find you an internship or job shadowing opportunity. Career and technical education is all about transitioning, and Lynchburg has some great places to work and some great career opportunities. We want to give our students the tools that they need to transition into those great careers here locally. So if you have any questions about career and technical education, give me a call, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Health Advisory?
Equity Task Force is meeting next week. Health Advisory, Ben.
Quick update, Ann Von Gentry chaired the meeting. It was held on October 16th. 9 committee members were present. They started the evening with an activity to kind of focus in and have them think about the areas that they wanted to cover throughout the year and the rest of their meetings. They just went into another discussion about prevention options specifically related to tobacco prevention and targeting juuling to see if we can knock some of that out. The health department gave an update on flu mist. There was an update on elementary family life education. And then they started talking about a project that was really interesting to research called the Pillowcase Project. It's a Red Cross project that originated out of the Katrina hurricane tragedy in New Orleans about how to prepare young children for disasters and how they're going to do that. So their next meeting is November 13th. And they will be getting a full presentation on the Pillowcase Project to evaluate whether that is something that they will recommend to the board at a future meeting. So.
And Special Ed Advisory, Mr. Vanderwerker is not here, but he did give me an update on the October 22nd Disabilities Awareness Night that was held at Heritage High School. They had over 25 participants in the event. Their focus was understanding students with mental health needs, strategies and supports for educators and families. And throughout the night, they had table sessions. Some of the sessions included strategies to support students with anxiety, twice exceptional if you're gifted with a disability. An overview of Orton Gillingham reading strategies, which is a reading strategy that we use in the division. The eligibility criteria, some assistive technology used by students as they access the curriculum, the VDOE graduation and credit requirements, building a quality transition plan through parent-teacher collaboration, IEP development, and a parent panel on negotiating the referral child study evaluation eligibility and IEP maze. So,
That's a lot.
yes, it was. So.
Thank you all. That now leads us to our comprehensive strategic plan discussion. After this, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
All right, so each month,
I'll introduce Hope.
as a part of our comprehensive strategic plan, which I keep losing over here, which is in a working draft form, and we hope to have this nice and cleaned up and pretty by the end of December. But part of our plan, goal number 1, student growth and development and success, we do have objectives under each section of the plan. So tonight, I'm going to invite Allison up to join me. One of our objectives is 1.6.5, and it is to review, revise, and enhance the English Language Learner, ELL, programs and services. And I asked Allison, Dr. Jordan, to give us a preview of what's to come with ELL.
Good evening. ELL seems to be one of the minor parts of my job description, but it has consumed a lot of my time. Just to give you some numbers, we have 221 current English learners who qualify for special instruction. 97 of them are considered newcomers. So almost half of our English learners are new to the country and or have very limited skills in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So one of the things in this program evaluation of our English Learner program is to set up a welcome center. So I am happy to announce and a little bit nervous to announce that it will go live before second semester. And it's one of those things where we've talked about it, we've planned for it, we have a space for it. It's going to be on the second floor of Heritage High School. There's a bus stop near there, so it's very accessible as far as transportation is concerned. We have a newcomer program at Heritage High School, so it seems to make the most sense that it be located there. Every single meeting we have about this, we come up with one more thing that we should think of. We should involve this entity, or we should involve this entity. It's going live, and I've said it live on camera, so it has to go live. So we have a lead English learner teacher that's working in this. She's going to be there 2 days a week, and it's going to involve multiple departments. It's going to involve every single school working together to help these families. And it's to help families who have limited English proficiency. The students may have more proficiency than their parents, so it's to help all the families that have limited English proficiency. It will be to help them get the documents necessary for enrollment, understand the American schooling process. We even have lots of school supplies and things to send home with parents, because if they don't understand what flashcards are, or they don't even understand American school supplies. So we have bought things, we have set up a room, we have gotten documents translated, and there will be something that we have forgotten about. So I hope that the community will treat us with grace when we screw up a little bit in the beginning. But I'm so excited to think about this group, because I think oftentimes when we think of achievement gap, or when we think of different categories, we typically think race, we typically think white and black. But there are many groups in Lynchburg City Schools that need extra services or need extra attention. We're going to try to work together with Johnson Health and a lot of our community partners in this Welcome Center to make sure that Lynchburg City Schools is wrapping our arms around these new families to our community. And obviously our newcomer population is growing. Our number of English learners is staying pretty much the same, but the amount of newcomers are really changing. So the dynamic shows us that we need something like a Welcome Center.
Question?
Is it open to only enrolled students or any community members? The reason I'm asking is we get a lot of exchange students at University of Lynchburg who come here only for a semester, and it'll be a big asset for them.
You just upped the bar on her.
Why don't we start with our students, and when we get really good at the services we offer, we will branch out.
We will let you know how to set it up at University.
Yes.
Dr. Coleman?
I really appreciate your passion. It's very evident. And it's going to be successful.
I hope so.
Oh.
It'll be better than what we currently have.
Which I'm not sure is. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing it in action.
So part 2 of that, and thank you, Dr. Jordan, for presenting. I do want to give the board like a little bit of here's to come, here's what we've done as we do the strategic plan, and I agree the enthusiasm behind this. It's going to take all of us to make it successful, but I'm looking forward to it as well. Also, under student growth and development, we have 2 other objectives, 1.22 and 1.32, which talk about reducing the achievement gap, which is something that we started with the presentation from OCR. For targeted subgroups, whether it's Black, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, or ELL students, in both math and reading using the SOL. Also with this, as we mentioned, and is also mentioned in the OCR data, is that Bass School has a different calendar. And one of the things that the principal, Monica Hendricks, was looking at is trying to tie the calendar, that year-round calendar, the intersessions, with success at her school. So going to the accountability piece, I'm like, all right, let's see what the data says. And kudos to Ms. Hendricks and her team for putting together what you have in front of you, which is very similar to what we had from Lincoln Elementary School, as well as some of the things that have been done. So what, again, we tied it to, here's our district goal. You can see the school improvement plan from September of last year. So we're looking back at, what did you do last year? What did you put in place? And how did those efforts work? So Ms. Hendricks has identified her goals for reading, math, science, Virginia studies. She's also listed some strategies that she uses in her school with her staff, how she ties her 21st century learning program, and she also offers an intercession program, which if you turn to the back of that, you'll see a little bit more information about that because of their year-round calendar. She also broke down for us the performance of students who participated in at least one intercession, and whether or not they passed the SOL tests, and if they showed growth over time. And she was very happy with the results for her school. Like I said earlier, she's always striving to get better and better and better. But this is one of the areas that she is most pleased with. If you look down at the bottom, you can see the BAS scores, both federal, which are just straight scores, and then also the VDOE scores, which shows students who have shown growth over time. And you can see where her school has landed. I'm going to go down the VDOE column. And she separated it into her subgroups, with Black students getting 75% on English and 85% on math. So there is definitely, as we saw in the OCR report from the early 2009 to 10, all the way through up until today, the progress that Bass has made. There is an area that she is still working on and is making progress with, and she has a wonderful relationship with team members in the back from the special ed department working with students with disabilities. But the one thing that I call it the Bass family has is high standards and high expectations for all students. So you can see a little bit of that. And again, the last page talks about the accreditation, a little more detail in terms of level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is where you want to be. So as you look at the data for subgroups and you look at the data across English and math for achievement gap, you can see the only gap that exists is with students with disabilities. And I've also given you, or Monica's also put on here, the chronic absenteeism over a 3-year period, and you can see that that has also decreased significantly. Mrs. Hendricks is not here tonight, but I think I can speak for her when she will say, see, my calendar works, would be the conversation that she would have with me and would like me to pass along to you. So again, kudos to Ms. Hendricks, the staff at Bass, the students and families for the wonderful work that they are doing.
Dr. Gupta, this goes to your question about where are we seeing the progress in terms of the outcome. Are we working at 10%? Are we working, and that's where this information is. And I think we'll see more of it from other schools as well. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Johnson.
I think this is helpful. It shows the progress and it shows a lot of intentionality and the level of detail that all the staff gets to see, and hopefully the families going there too. I know that Bass a few years ago was struggling, and this is really good to see. So congratulations to Ms. Hendricks and her staff.
Well said. Okay. Before we have a 10-minute break, I'd like to welcome our legal counsel here tonight, which I meant to at the beginning. Thank you for coming and for being here with us. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take, it's almost 10 to 7. We're going to take a 10-minute break. I'm ready to start. All right, we're back in session. And the unfinished business is the first will be the Lynchburg City School Board Policy, Section 4, Finance. Get in the mic on. Here we go.
Okay. So we had a couple policies that were presented last month that are up for approval. There were also some questions regarding some of the policies, and I sent emails regarding that. I hope I answered all of them. I know there is a request, which I think Ms. Carter will talk about, for the suicide policy.
And for the one for the finance, just one.
Okay. Okay.
All right, floor is now open for questions and comments. We did receive some questions that Dr. Edwards sent out to the board, and one of them deals with the on page 173, the VSBA equivalent, and I think you said that should be EFZ, so that would be a change that we would need to make. The other was regarding the annual budget calendar, and the request that maybe we look at adding some kind of flexible language in there so that if there is a need to be changed, that there is a way that that could happen. And I thought that was a good suggestion. Did anybody else have any other thoughts on it?
I didn't think that calendar was like hard and fast.
And it's
have a
not. I
notional.
think it's proposed from the superintendent yearly or designee. I didn't know if the board had to approve it, or is it just something that comes to the board for?
I think really we approved it.
I thought we
last
did
time,
too.
yes.
It didn't.
It's an attachment to that policy, or exhibit, I guess, EBE.
Okay. So if this is done yearly, do we need to have add the flexibility language, I guess is the question.
Well, things do change within the year. There may be delays or whatever, but some people really hold to that.
That's true.
If you say it's gonna happen in November and it gets pushed back to December, then the question is, are you abiding by your policies?
So do you just want dates subject to change or something like
Yes,
that?
yeah, dates.
Okay. Does that work?
I'd like to go through all the proposals and then we can amend the language at one time, if that's okay.
Okay.
The next one is on page 165. The board member suggested that to amend the policy to change the language to, find 165. Yes. To add the language that for proper accounting and safety, all monies would be deposited daily to the principal's office or school financial officer. That was the for
Page 171.
164. Right now, it's as soon as possible, no later than the end of school day, personnel in possession of cash shall turn it over for safekeeping and proper accounting. And in this way, it just says it's for, the reason it is going to be deposited is for proper accountability and safety, accounting and safety.
It said all monies will be deposited daily, correct? Yes.
For
'Cause the other
proper
one-
accounting and safety, all monies will be deposited daily to the principal's office or school finance officer.
Yes, because the other seems like an invitation.
The finance office here in this building?
No, school finance, if they have a school finance officer.
Okay.
We don't have money in this building.
We refer to those people as bookkeepers.
So, but the policy says school finance officer. So do you want to change it to bookkeepers? Is that what you're recommending?
I didn't catch that
Yeah.
wording. I don't know that we have anybody referred to in our organizations as a school finance officer.
I think when we did, it's been a while since we discussed it, whether or not, because elementary schools have bookkeepers that they share, and if they're not there that day, if the principal took the money, so it's the person whoever could be, like a principal or the bookkeeper, who is responsible for the school finance. I don't think it's an official title, as in CFO. I don't know. We could put bookkeeper / principal, if that makes it.
It does say school finance officer. We already have principals, so we should replace that with bookkeeper? Does that make sense? Good catch.
But the key is that they will be deposited daily, so we won't have this 500, 200 sitting there.
Yeah. All right, so do I have a motion to amend the language in that policy as we described, that the dates on the annual budget, the dates are subject to change on okay, and I wanted to do all three of them, and the one about the
EFC, EF.
yeah, the bookkeeper, and also the adding the
EFZ is the correct one
on the table of contents. On page 173, it should be EFZ. So we would change EFZ, the dates of the calendar could change, and then the one about depositing money and to the principal's office or the bookkeeper daily. Dr. Gupta made a motion to approve it. And Dr. Nilles, any further discussion? So we're voting on amending the language in these policies. All in favor? Aye. Okay. And this is up for action tonight. So is there a motion to approve Lynchburg City School Board Policy Section 4 Finance? Dr. Coleman made the motion. Ms. Carter, second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That. The second unfinished business deals with the school board goals, norms, and protocols. This is for formal vote tonight. We discussed this at other board meetings as well as at our annual retreat. Are there any questions or discussion related to this? We went over it rather thoroughly, I think. Okay, is there a motion to approve? Dr. Brennan, thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Carter, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We will have these laminated and put in everybody's door. All right, that now moves us to new business. High School Program of Studies. This is for information tonight and for action on our December 3rd meeting.
Everyone has a copy of the, good evening everyone. I think everyone has a copy of the program of study. The committee, of course, has met numerous times to discuss what we wanted to do with that, made up with the principals and guidance and folks from my staff. I guess I'll just walk you through a couple of the, or walk you through the highlights of the changes. The building trades and precision machining is still being offered, but just not as dual enrollment. That's a licensure issue with that with CVCC. So if we can get that rectified, then that could be changed. But at this point, we need to be able to just offer the course here. There's no longer the $75 withdrawal fee from Virtual Virginia, so that's page 5. We can remove that. I guess also saying on page 15, we're clarifying some language. That's one of the things we worked on and felt strongly about as a group, that we wanted to make sure the language was as clear as possible for students and for parents, so that, you know, when they're using that as a reference, it made sense, and that if anything we could put in to help make the decisions, or help folks in making decisions easier when they were reading, if they could do that. Page 16, there are things that are highlighted because we're waiting on a couple of course codes for these courses. And changes to the art are also explained on this page. Once the course codes are created, we can add those. Those, of course, are our course codes. We were changing, let's see, the course name for auto service technology to automotive technology to match the state course names. We're also looking at the state requirements and how the state names courses, and trying to bring ours into alignment. It's basically the same course. We just want the name to be the same. That, of course, makes it much easier when we're trying to match up transcripts with kids that are transferring from different places, so that things are the same. Those are also awaiting new course codes. We added a heading on page 49 for cultural arts. We kind of went through the program of studies looking for things for consistency. So the way it's organized, we tried to have each one of the sections organized in the same manner. So that heading was missing. There was a change requested with the art courses to convert some semester courses that were typically taken together into a year-long course. One of the things that can cause confusion for students are we're trying to earn the sequential elective credits, and if things are in pieces, sometimes that gets lost in translation. So the kids were taking them that way, so we wanted to list it that way. We also, they felt strongly about adding an advanced portfolio art course. In the past, they've done that more as an independent study, but when you have kids that are applying to go to an art school, they oftentimes request a portfolio, and it's a substantial amount of work. It's more than enough to make up a course. We're doing that independently, so felt like it needed to just be in the program of studies. We included on page 59 courses that were also dual enrollment that weren't reflected in the past program of study, so we wanted to make sure that if we were offering it that it was in the program of study. Page 61, we did add college chemistry 1 and 2. That was a request from STEM Academy. That's based on interest of students wanting to take those courses in STEM. The STEM Academy makes that decision, so add that to the program of study. And then on page 68, there were some changes in the language in sequential electives. That just reflects the change in how we kind of restructured how we were doing the art classes. So just to make that match up with that. All in all, we don't have no real major changes with that, just basically trying to clarify and make sure we were consistent in the way we did it. We've also looked forward to having a different format with this. It's more of a digital format. It'll look really good on the website, and I think it turned out very professional, particularly when you pull it up to look at it. And it's also very accessible, so be able to, if you're looking for things, to be able to search and be able to skip from one section to another rather than having to scroll through the whole thing. You'll be able to click on the table of contents and jump right to the section you're looking for. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
I think Dr. Nilles?
I guess I just have a comment. You know, my first time through there, I thought some of these courses were being eliminated. You know, and you're really just sort of recasting them so it matches. I didn't know if you might want to consider like just a little intro, you know, course changes that, you know, are really just sort of getting a better match with the state requirements or whatever, and that these courses still exist. It's just, you know, so when someone comes in for automotive technology, they're not gonna, or especially the art, looked like it was more, you know, just to help the initial shock.
Okay.
So, just a suggestion.
I think it's a good suggestion. or any other suggestions or questions, just after you have the time to spend some time looking through it again, just send them in.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, next, Lynchburg City School Board Instruction and Program Policies.
That's me jumping ahead. Now I get it, Sharon. I missed that. We do have up for information tonight and action next month. The Instruction and Program Committee met on September 27th and reviewed a couple policies, which are here, as well as we're continuing the conversion from the old numerical policies to VSBA policies. And I know there is, now I have it, a question regarding the first one, JHHRZ, which is the regulation for the suicide prevention. And I do believe we have a recommendation for the second paragraph.
Yes.
Okay.
My recommendation is that we delete the last sentence in the second paragraph that says administrator will contact the school resource officers for consultation. This is regarding suicide prevention. It just seems like this is the last step or the person that's going to make this decision, and this is not a discipline problem, it's a behavioral problem, and I just don't see what the resource officer, the consultation is doing here. And according to what I've learned is that it's not to initiate an ECO or TDO, and I don't know whether or not the resource officer is skilled in mental health, first aid, or CIT. So, and I checked with some of the other policies in different school boards around this area and in Fairfax and Roanoke County, and their policy does not specify or spell out the resource officers for consultation. So I suggest that we delete that. We don't want to criminalize this.
Dr. Mills?
So the concern really more is a stigma associated with having this in here as opposed to, there's not really any practical impact to how the school does the assessment or responds to the situation.
And I think the resource officer is part of the threat assessment team anyway.
Right.
So they're going to be
Right.
in part of that process. But no other school has it elevated to this level.
Dr. Coleman?
Madam Chair, based upon School Board Member Carter's research beyond our school division, I would support her recommendation in whichever way is necessary.
Other board members?
I'm good with it too, as long as there's no
Okay.
We talked about it a lot.
So we're not taking a vote on this, so all we have to do is say that we want this sentence.
So when you receive it
The
in
next time.
December, it'll have that removed.
Okay?
Okay.
Good point, Sharon, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Brennan?
Just a quick question and another one just for comment, probably for the next meeting for discussion or in between this with others. On page 2, it refers to in that first full paragraph, the second sentence, the licensed school professional shall ensure the local or state social service agent is notified. Who is the licensed school professional in the schools?
It could be the social worker, it could be a school counselor.
It is someone involved. It's not just it's not the principal or
It can be the principal.
It can be.
yes.
Okay.
Yes,
School
most of them
social
are because they're licensed.
It usually is. That goes to the principal, is my experience.
Another question that I appreciate input on is that when we look at the different levels of risk, the high level of risk is someone who is threatening and seems to be an active concern about hurting himself, hurting someone else. I just wonder whether there should be, we go on to say that and at the end of that page, if the student is deemed at risk, a recommendation made to a parent to obtain mental health evaluation counseling. And then prior to entering school, the parent will request to supply a school with a letter. But is that third category one where we should say that
Yes.
person needs to be referred for mental counseling immediately? You need to be referred to a source for that rather
If I
than?
could provide the
Yeah,
answer to that.
sure.
So there are actually 4 levels: low, medium, high, and imminent. As far as a threat assessment, anything high or above by the Virginia Code does require a mental health assessment and documentation of that health assessment before the student can re-enter school. So it is the practice that we are expected to adhere to.
But should it be spelled out in our policy?
Right.
We can spell it out in the policy, but then you end up with a policy that will forever chase what the Department of Criminal Justice Services might put out in their updates or their publications.
It's just a matter of coordinating the two. It'd be cumbersome to try to keep them all up to date together.
This has 3 levels for this
Right.
policy, the low, medium, and high. It doesn't have, so their highest level is the high level of risk.
Okay,
Which I
pardon
guess
me, that's the self-harm risk assessment.
Mhm.
I was referring to the actual threat assessment.
Sure.
If you go to the last paragraph, it talks about the formalized threat assessment form in addition to the self-harm assessment form.
Yeah. So I just wondered if that's, and again, it could be a discussion, whoever looking at these policies, whether there should be a suggestion that at a high level that student needs to be referred for mental health counseling and not just let go, and may or may not get it.
That's true, and that's
said after there is a need for immediate intervention, even more specific than that, you want more?
Yeah, because we don't actually hold anybody to it. There's a need for immediate, but then we go on to say that.
But to
we'll
come
contact
back,
the
don't they
parent.
have to?
They have to have a letter saying that they were evaluated. I'm just concerned that they may go home and hurt themselves. You know, that day, they may, before they can actually get help, that they would hurt themselves.
And that's a legitimate concern. I think we really just need to look at this policy. According to some of the other policies, these risks are not spelled out. It's just different. I think we really just need to look at this one again.
Well, this is the reg,
Right,
not
but
the actual policy.
right,
This is
but
the
we-
policy you did a couple months ago.
Oh, that's just the regulation. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So this has a little bit more detail.
Well, we need to work on this one again, I think.
Well, I think once it comes out of committee, it's now at the school board that we need the discussion and we need to make the determination as to what the language wants to be. So if we want to make the language more defined in the high level of risk, to add that a student is to be referred.
I think a referral is needed.
Mike?
My suggestion would be, if we're going to discuss this, it would be at the next meeting to discuss the parent policy along with the regulation, and so everybody has a context for how this fits in. Because right now we're just considering it in isolation. So we wouldn't be voting on JHH,
No.
but in principle.
Right. Does everybody understand what Mike is suggesting?
Say when this comes back to us, that I ask the administration actually present kind of a broader discussion of the policy JHH, and then we go into the regulations. So now we have a context to attach that to. So, I mean, because I'm hanging here with. I understand the comments, but I need some perspective, which I don't have with just the regulation here.
All right, so does that work for everyone? That will you bring this back? We will have JHH policy to look at the same time. Does that work? Okay.
Just a question of clarification, so will we be taking action on that in December, or will we be still discussing it in December and taking action on it in January?
We will be discussing it and taking action, and the action could be that we delay it until January.
Okay.
But I think we need to leave it on the table that we'll get it ahead of time, and so that if we have specific questions, we could ask them and get information back. But if there's no reason to delay it, then we can go ahead and vote on it.
Okay.
Is that agreeable? All right, continue.
There was, I don't think there were any questions regarding the field trip policy, unless there were.
I have one question.
Okay.
It said the superintendent will make an annual report to the school board on field trips taken. I have a question about that too. 'Cause just just asking.
I missed that one in the review. Yeah, I can. Have not done that, so I
Well,
can.
I've not ever heard it.
I'll make a motion, we strike.
Strike that. I was gonna say, can I amend the policy before it comes
You
back
have
up?
no idea the number of field trips that go on.
Woo, yes.
Do we need a report?
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
That's why I brought it up.
Thank you. Good call. That will be changed when you see it again in December.
All righty, keep
Okay.
going.
Okay. The school admission policy, the substantial changes are in the middle under the foreign exchange students. We originally had language about foreign students who have an F1 immigration status, but we didn't have any language about J1 immigration status. So what you see included here is obviously our support for a foreign exchange program, and then the fact that we are going to establish an MOU or MOA with the foreign exchange organizations. There are several, but I think there are about 5 that are in and about Lynchburg, 2 that really work with us over the last couple years. There will be a processing fee that the organization will pay. Students who are placed in homes in Lynchburg City Schools will be treated as Lynchburg City School students, so there's no tuition or additional charge for those students. If an organization wants to place students in homes outside of Lynchburg City Schools and in the county, and the organization wants the students to attend Lynchburg City Schools, so if you're placed in Bedford or Carmel or Amherst, and the organization says, but we want them to come to Lynchburg City Schools, the organization would be responsible for paying the tuition for that if they're making a decision to send them someplace other than their home school with that. And that will be spelled out in our agreement with them. So that's the new language. Okay.
Ms. Garvey?
I still have a question as to why we would require someone placed outside of the city, an exchange student, and yet not require an exchange student placed inside the city. We're still talking about students who are not, citizens of the city of Lynchburg, that we're covering their tuition.
The organization would.
The organization's covering it for someone who is outside of the city limits. I guess I personally don't see a difference between an exchange student just because they're placed with a family in Lynchburg versus being placed with a family outside of the city.
I don't understand. When we had talked about placing outside of the city and them having to pay tuition, and we all agreed that that's what we wanted to do.
I think one of the comments that I sent to you was I felt like that those students, even if they are placed inside the city, should also pay tuition as well.
With the majority of the group, I think we went with the language, if you're placed in Lynchburg City Schools, you're treated as, within Lynchburg City limits, you're treated as a Lynchburg City School student.
And I think
And that,
the
I think, always
justification
been.
was that if you're
They're
living
paying
with a
taxes.
family in Lynchburg City Schools, then that family will be paying, they're supporting our school system through taxes and things like that. And that was my justification for it, because the family they do reside in Lynchburg. But
correct.
Okay.
Moving on to the copyright policy. So the VSBA policy EGAA, which is the copyright material. And then you'll see, oops, oh, that's kind of, yeah, are my things backwards? Yeah. I'm looking at page 43, which is the old field trip policy. You'll see some old policies that are covered by the new VSBA policy. So after that, on page 43 to 46 is the old field trip policy, then followed by the old copyright materials policy. All right, which we are eliminating. Thank you.
But it
Question?
is on page 42. It's the one that you're recommending.
Yes, page 42.
Any questions regarding this? As you read through this and you come up with additional questions, as always, if you send them to Dr. Edwards, then she can respond. Dr. Gupta?
I was going to say, has this policies been vetted out by a committee? The policies?
The work group.
Work group. So
Work group.
instead of going page by page, could we look at all of them like we have done for finance and others together?
Yes. Yeah.
If there are any questions.
Well, the suicide prevention was part of this, and we've already decided that we're going to look at that with the JHH policy. So that we've already decided we're going to look at. But if there are no other questions about that, then that would be the only one that we would discuss. Does that make sense? Right. Next, Lynchburg City School Board Personnel Policies, Ms. G.
I'm going to start it, and then she'll jump in.
Okay.
And we'll get towards the end. So, VSBA provided significant revision in the previous packet. So the committee met back in September. So the top tier of those you see that still have the alpha codes on it were those that were existing adopted policies that had VSBA updates. The last three in the top section, policy 5-34.1, regulation 5-51.3, and regulation 5-55.1 are just out and out deletions. They are no longer needed for Lynchburg City Schools. And the part that we really need your brain power and your review on is the last group, which would be what are our recommended new policies for reduction in force. Last time the reduction in force policies were updated was 2011-2012, which was actually coincides with the last time there was a reduction in force in the school division. So VSBA has their versions. They have been reviewed and scrutinized and actually discussed within personnel and finance and with previous legal counsel for about 2 years now. So it's time for you to take a look at them and give us your feedback. There's really not a lot of significance. I guess the one I do want to draw your attention to deals with acceptable computer use. So the legal wording and things have changed in that basically if you use a computer that we give you on our network, you are agreeing to all of those things. So we no longer have to have you personally sign an acceptable computer use agreement. Just the nature of having a Lynchburg City Schools device, you agree to those things. And then the next one that we discussed a lot dealt with tobacco products and nicotine vapor. And you can see those edits that begin on page 71 and 72. It really focused on an effort of trying to capture all of those things that students might be using at school that we don't want them to use at school, and ensuring that any adults that come on our property know that they shouldn't be using those things either. So those were the significant points of discussion. Dr. Sinha or Ms. Morrison, chime in.
It's also important to note that it's just not at school, that it's at school events, off-site school events, that this policy covers that. I don't know if any of you all read the article today about juuling and vaping, and that the number of users have gone up from 3.6 last year to 5.3 this year. It's a significant concern, and that was the reason we really went after this language to try to make it as specific as we could. Dr. Gupta?
In reduction of task force, the only issue I had was you say it's based on seniority. Now, if all the senior teachers or faculty are in high school, so and you have a clause about reassignment, so that reassignment could happen within from high school to middle school to elementary school, or reassignment within the same school?
Within licensure.
Within
You
the
have to
license.
be eligible for where, if you're getting placed somewhere else, then you're eligible for, you're qualified to be in that area.
So if all special education teachers are senior most,
K-12.
so what happens then? How do you fill other places?
Well, that's why it's not just seniority. That's why sometimes it's based on your licensure, what the high need. Like if it's a math teacher with 5 years experience, they may bump somebody who, it just depends on the high need. The seniority, you would look for an area, like if this person if they're reduced at this building and I have an opening at another building and something that they are qualified for, they would be one of the first people we looked at for that position. The policy that we had was very cumbersome. I came in on the tail right when that was being used, and it was unbelievable the amount of time that it took to even figure out what your list was going to be. So this kind of streamlined it into, hopefully we'll never have to use it. That's kind of, but we need something in place that's user-friendly if we ever get there.
When I was getting seniority and need of the division, is there a way to, mash them?
Well, let me back up a step or two in that the superintendent, if we were to ever encounter this, and I was in a division where I encountered this 2 years in a row, so you can identify you have to identify the specific areas where your reduction is needed. So it's not, it could be teachers in high schools, it could be math teachers, it could be elementary education certified teachers. So you identify that area, and then within that area, your seniority and all your other measures of where somebody falls in the order to determine who are the ones that get reduced.
Within one specialty.
Any other questions? If after reviewing this, if you have any questions, this is for action. Yes.
There's no other personnel policies. Jeffrey, we have a question about the personnel policies. Just a couple of questions, and this probably is my ignorance of policy versus regulations, but the comment, the new editorial piece in red about vaping on page 72, I think it is, says that the superintendent will be responsible for developing a regulation which contains provisions for the enforcement policy among students, employees, and visitors, including the enumeration of possible sanctions or disciplinary actions. So do those come at a later time? Do they come as part of the regulations? And the other, just a clarification, on page 77, we talk about criminal convictions and employees are not able to apply. Let's see, let me put it for you myself. I had thought that if someone applying for a job for the schools had any felony, they were not allowed to apply. I think that this is saying that Lynchburg City Schools shall require on its application for employment certification that the applicant has not been convicted of a felony or any offense involving the sexual molestation, physical or sexual abuse, or rape of a child, and point two, whether the applicant has been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude. So if someone has a felony that is not under those categories, can they apply to be an employee at Lynchburg City Schools?
They can apply. They won't get it.
It doesn't matter what it is. The Code of Virginia is very clear about it's any felony or any crime against a child. So, and then the one with the moral turpitude used to be in parentheses lying, cheating, and stealing. So if you've also been convicted of a misdemeanor for a moral turpitude, which is lying, cheating, and stealing, that's also something that would keep you from being hired with Lynchburg City Schools.
And Dr. Brennan, that paragraph is referring to the requirement that we must have in our application, that you have to physically check those yes/no boxes before you can proceed through the application. It won't even, it stops you if you don't answer those questions.
So as you already referred to, by that other law, do we not have to have that in our policy to say that an individual with any felony cannot apply?
This has always been in the policy.
This isn't that they can't apply. That paragraph is specific that we, Lynchburg City Schools, must have a system, Winocular is our application system, that requires the applicant to answer those questions.
These questions.
those questions specifically.
And they can actually complete the application, but what happens when they answer yes to, there's a series of questions. Have you ever been convicted of a felony, or this piece right here for the code? If you answer yes to that, it automatically sets it as a needs review. So I have to go in and clear it for somebody to be, so somebody may say, yes, I've been convicted of this, so we go in and clear it if it's not one of these things that would prohibit them from being eligible to be hired.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. That now moves us to operations, policies, and regulations.
So everybody should have gotten a printout of the operations policy conversion packet. There were several meetings that occurred really over the past year to review these. They are now in a state that they are ready to come forward to you for review and hopeful approval in December. It's really just some straight out conversions. There weren't a lot of things that were contentious or discussed in detail. It's kind of all over the place in that you've got a lot of old Chapter 4 stuff, you've got some Chapter 6 stuff dealing with emergencies, and you've got some old Chapter 7 stuff and a fair amount of transportation related items towards the back end. Dr. Brennan or Mr. Harvey, if there's anything you'd like to add to it, please let us know if you have comments as you review things. But there wasn't anything that I was specifically desiring to highlight in this.
I asked that question in the finance policy group too. In every board meeting, we get a personnel report, we get a finance report. Is there a way to get the operations report to the board every month so we get information about buses, how they're working, the meals? I know you're working smoothly, but then the board will have an automatic feedback information loop. I don't know what's the thinking of the other members.
And I think that if that is something that the board wants to have, that we can request that, but it doesn't have anything to do with this policy.
So it's not operations will report every month to
And I think even with the personnel report that you get, it's very specific to hiring. Is usually what's in the personnel report. And the finance report you get is narrowed to the revenues and the large-scale revenues and expenditures. In an operations report, what are those big things that you're trying to isolate?
Bus comes to my mind, transportation, number one.
Okay, what about transportation?
How's the status of transportation? How many buses were, pickups were missed or, late? So average delay on a weekly basis. I'll give you just one variable to look at. If there are any of the zero delay, then so those are you can pick up operational parameters.
Right, which is stuff that, as I look at Angel and Ben, things that we do in our practice and in our work, but again, I'm going back to the larger scheme of the board in terms of the governance piece, with having a monthly report on how many buses were late, how many times we had to go back and pick kids up.
That's an administrative thing.
Yes.
That's getting too deep in the weeds there.
Yes.
But it is causing, if it's causing uneasiness in the community or if it's causing pain there, then it's board's responsibility as an oversight body to have the reporting.
And I think your next agenda item is going to address the uneasiness and trying to manage the board, because a lot of the challenge that we have with late pickups is due to lack of bus drivers, and we're having to do some double runs or combined runs and things like that. So there are efforts that are being made to increase bus driver pay, recruit more bus drivers, so that these aren't missed. Some of the communication pieces that we missed, often our mechanics and our dispatch staff are out driving, so parents feel frustrated if they can't reach anybody by phone, but that might be part of that as well.
Yeah, one of the things that Mr. Harvey and I heard when we did a new board training was an excellent report about the number of drives that they made, runs that they made, how many drivers that they had, how many average. And that was a general information, but it was very helpful. I thought it was. Mr. Harvey, did you think?
I think so too, and I think if that's something that you have a specific interest in, I think it could be maybe he is allowed to speak with transportation. I agree. I don't think that that's something that the board needs to be concerned with as a body.
Dr. Brennan?
So I know I'm the only person who gets excited about talking about viral infections. Because we have our attorney here tonight, I'd love to just ask her for discussion for maybe the next meeting, which is on page 102 of the policy where the heading is possible exposure to viral infections. It says that if someone is exposed to body fluids in general, you usually ask permission. You have to get permission of the person who was exposed to do the blood test. And we use the term in this policy that that such person shall also be deemed to have consented to the release of such test results or to be tested. And I just be interesting for next meeting, or maybe in between this and next meeting, you could just look into that. I'm not sure if we actually have a permission slip, or we just, when someone signs an application to be employed here, we say we will do testing if necessary. Just what that
Is it a
means.
legal requirement?
Yeah, the legal requirement for testing somebody. Just says they are deemed to have given consent. I just wonder whether that actually is clear enough or appropriate.
Can you highlight a specific paragraph?
Yeah, sure. It's page, it's actually
102.
twice. It's on page 102, and it's on the 4th paragraph, where in the middle it says, such person shall also be deemed to have consented to the release of such tests. And then farther down, we also say that they're deemed to be tested.
Second paragraph from the bottom.
Yeah. So again, it's just a minor point, but since we're lucky enough to have our attorney with us, and if you would mind just looking into that at some point, just to clarify.
Good job.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Mr. Harvey?
I did have a few points that I just wanted to ask. On page 25, I wanted to know if maybe in lieu of placing a date under each of the regulations, we just simply want to say, current version or something like that, so we don't have to coordinate that to be updated on 25. Because it's dated April 1st, 1986.
Yeah, 25 is actually a deleted policy, so
Okay.
future legal references don't contain
Any dates?
Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to make sure of, that we didn't include a date there. And then the second item that I had was on page 80. And this deals with the change. And this might be for discussion, but it says, in addition to the drills mentioned above, the school board provides training. I didn't know if that's more of the superintendent as an administrative piece, or do we?
Well, that would be a section that came out of the last updates to the Code of Virginia at the
Okay.
summer legislative session. And that's one of those that they're waiting to determine what the training needs to be.
Okay. All right. So they're just holding us accountable to make sure that we ensure that that's being done. Okay.
And that's one of those that started with the State Board of Education will determine what the training that needs to be is done, and the training hasn't, they're working on that.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Any other questions? As you go through this again, if you have other questions, if you send them, like I said, to Dr. Edwards, and she will decide the responses. All right, the next is substitute bus driver pay rate.
I'm going to ask Mr. A to come up and read this discussion items, as he's the man that works with the folks every day.
Good evening. I'm here requesting that the school board looks at what we pay our sub-drivers. Sub-drivers are drivers who are not a contractor, so there's no benefits allowed. Right now, our pay schedule is for $9.25 an hour. And since I've been here, not even a year yet, even though it feels a lot longer, I had 5 people come in, 3 from GLTC, 2 from Liberty, asking to be a sub-driver. We went through the whole process. We sent it to Marie G, and once they find out $9.25, they say, thanks, but not thanks. Since the start of the school year, I have lost 2 drivers because they've gone to work, one for a beer distributor and one for a trucking company because of pay. I have also lost 1 mechanic, and on his resignation letter says, I came here to fix buses, not to drive buses. So I'm asking you to consider to increase the rate to $11. Even though I'm here only for the drivers, I also want you to consider to do something for the bus aides. The bus aides start at $8.25 an hour. So.
Madam Chair, this is for action?
Yes. This went to the Finance Committee. This came from the Finance Committee. Dr. Gupta?
Just to support, when we discussed in the Finance Committee, I think it's a good step, first step forward. But the concern I had there was that we're still lagging behind the county.
Yes, sir.
$13 or so per hour.
Campbell County starts everybody at $13.45. Bedford County starts at $13.35 an hour. And once you become contracted, Bedford County goes to $15.50 an hour once you are contracted. So we're behind. We are the lowest pay. I did not get a response from Amherst or other counties, just so that I could have all that data.
Yeah. Dr. Copeland will shoot me, but this is a Band-Aid step towards where we want to be. Sort of a short step, $11.
Right. This is just for the bus drivers, and that as we're discussing and developing our budget, our next budget, this will be part of what we talk about in terms of our salaries and our scales. But this is not about all of that tonight, although we acknowledge that there's great work to be done. This is a short-term fix to something so that we have subs, so that mechanics don't have to drive the buses, and that
Or
the
dispatchers or myself.
Yes,
It's been an opportunity.
that they can do the job that we've hired them to do. And this would put us toward that step. Dr. Coleman?
I'm in agreement. I'm just wanting to hear where is the money coming from.
The amount of money was, I can't remember the exact. What is that?
Right now, we have no on-call sub-drivers. We are spending $0 out of our budget because we have no on-call sub-drivers. What we're having to do is when we have to put a mechanic on there driving a bus who has a significantly higher pay rate than a bus driver would, and then we still need the mechanic to do his mechanic work when he gets done driving. So we end up paying a mechanic time and a half. So there's a savings offset by not having somebody driving overtime hours, and even across our entire sub-driver pool. Make sure I got the number right. If just that move for 7,075 hours of work would only impact our budget by $12,381. So I feel that the offset of overtime savings more than covers what the increased pay would be for substitute drivers.
Thank you.
And this is the reason why we brought it as action, because I feel it is a critical need, especially as we move into the winter months, and we know that cold and flu season is coming. And you might recall a few days last year where we struggled for coverage on Fridays. because of scheduled absences on top of sick absences. So building a pool of true substitute drivers that can come in when we call them at 5:30 or when we call them at 1:30 and can cover a shift helps us in those challenging days.
Further questions? Dr. Nellis?
I move to approve this.
Second.
This is one of these, this is what the labor market's signaling, and, you know, I think we clearly need to respond. And as Dr. Copeland indicated, you know, there's a cost avoidance, which is, it's not a paper cost, it's a real cost. So I support it anyway. So made a motion.
Motion for Dr. Nellis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Dr. Copeland. Any other discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor?
I guess my comment would be is I think we all recognize this is just an interim step.
Right. We know that we've got a lot of work to do, but this is an interim step for what we need right now. Thank you. All right. Call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Fund balance recommendations.
You have before you a summary on the agenda of the fund balance, which does total a little over $5 million. You also have a detailed fund balance request list that breaks down that summary, which is also aligned to our strategic plan goals for that. So first, let me just start with the amount, because I'm sure there are questions regarding how, how or from where does that fund balance come from. So all last year, we talked a little bit about the budget for health insurance claims, which is very different than the reserve. So these are two separate accounts, the health insurance reserve and the money budgeted and allocated for claims. At the end of last year, I think the last 2 months, maybe we saw an uptick in claims and got a little bit of concern. At the August and September meeting, Kim talked a little bit about what she called the true up, which is we were waiting to actually pay all the claims so that we could see how much money was left in that allocated fund. There was a question about what happens to it, and we explained at that point that that goes to fund balance. At that point, it's after the fiscal school year. So that amount is about $1.3 million that was allocated for claims that ended up, even with the claims that we had and we paid, I think it was somewhere over $500,000 the last couple, we had $1.3 million left. So that is part of what goes into our fund balance. Always what we have as a concern is anything that's a salary lapse. And I don't know, Mr. A, are all of your budgeted regular driver positions filled? No. So when we have a case like that, and I don't know how many you actually budgeted for, 100 and...
I have right now 19 open positions.
19 open positions.
Just
So
on the driver's side.
just on the driver's side, and that's currently. So if we roll back to last year, I don't know what that number was last year, but those open positions had a salary associated with them because we were hoping to get the people and pay the people, but when that doesn't happen, that's considered an unfilled position. Or if we get people 6 months later, there's a lapse. So there are salaries that are sitting there for these positions that we desperately want to fill and have money available, including the sub budget as well. That was about $1.1 million worth of salaries and gaps and unfilled positions with that. 1.6 million, that's just a really rough estimate, and I actually made a note of I looked at the August 6th financial report where there is a very detailed outline of everything up till June 30th, and you can see in some of on your report, they're called other. So you have a personnel line, and then you'll have other. And in those other categories, there is unspent funds. There was funds budgeted, but then money wasn't spent. So I tried to put some examples, like a vehicle operation and maintenance service. We have to budget for what we think the service is going to be. We hope that all of our vehicles stay in top-notch care, that we don't have to replace I don't know, a transmission or something big. And when we don't, the money that we budgeted is still there. So that's an example of some of the purchase services and materials account. And those are throughout various departments. We saw them in instruction, we saw them in transportation, and tech and maintenance as well. So there's some funds that are in there, and again, I just roughly rounded real quickly. I also wanted you to remember that at the end of last year, right about the time that we presented you with the $1.2 million for reallocation requests to get buses, included in the original request was $1 million worth of other stuff, including teacher laptops. There were some switches and Sonotol things that we needed to do as well. And at that point, we were late May, June, the board agreed to to do the reallocation request for the buses, but not the additional $1 million. So what happened to that $1 million? It rolled over into fund balance, which is something that you see, which is part of that. Also, if you go back to the September board agenda and you look at the revenues and you look at the percentages, you'll see something like in Medicaid where we actually got more money than we budgeted for. We anticipate this is what we're going to get for Medicaid revenue, and we actually had, I think it's somewhere upwards to $380,000 more that came in. And the Medicaid comes in at the end of June. So again, it's not money that we can utilize immediately in the current school year. What happens to that money? Rolls over into fund balance. There were a couple other areas, bus transportation, some other areas where what we budgeted as revenue, what we would receive, we actually received more. So again, that rolls into fund balance. And then there was, and I think we mentioned this at the Finance Committee meeting, there was a correction to the prior year, 2017-18, which the only way to make that correction is to have the money roll into fund balance again. So that was about $117,000. So those totals don't add up exactly to $5 million because again, I rounded and I just pulled some information and left things like $5,000 here, $12,000 here off. But I wanted to get the board an understanding of where some of these funds are coming from. Now, what do we anticipate to be different going forward? Salary lapses are going to happen. We're always going to budget for the bus drivers we need. We hope that we get them and spend the money on the actual people. But if we don't, we still have the budget for those bus drivers. I talked a little bit about turnover. Anytime you have turnover, there's possibility for salary lapses if somebody leaves in January and the next person doesn't start until May. There's some salary that happens there. So you're still going to see that. What we were trying to be intentional about this year, this current year, going into this budget build, is putting money up front in maintenance, tech, transportation, so that we were breaking that cycle of what I called wait and get. Last time I did this, I think, was in the spring, where in the spring we have these reallocation requests so that we could fund some of the things that are desperately needed in those departments. So it's going to take us some time to retool that cycle, which you might see a decrease in the amount of reallocation requests and hopefully fund balance as well. So as for some of the projects that we have, there are 18 things listed. That is not by priority. That is just grouped by category. We also did a subtotal, so the first three that are on the list, the elementary gym, EC glass practice field, and then another $636,000 for CIP projects, which are most likely going to be allocated to CIP projects at Dunbar. That's about $2 million of our requests that would go back into capital improvement programs that the city would be funding that are on their list. There's some textbook reserves. We do have a new textbook adoption coming up, in addition to budgeting for the reserve, so you'll see some money there. And the board wanted to put some funds in the healthcare reserve, which is the separate $2.2 million, to get that up to about $2.5 million. So you can see some subtotals there. We have what we call school revitalization projects. Those are things that, things that are just old and that need to be replaced, updated, upgraded in some cases. And you'll see a list of those things as well as some other items on here. Some items for the board, getting board docs so that we have a seamless way with our meeting and agendas, and some other things. So we've accounted for all of the $5 million. Questions?
Dr. Gupta?
I'm glad to see this source of money, but troubles me is we went to city asking for $800,000 for salary, and some of will these projections there at that point? Somehow I can understand Medicaid doesn't come till June, but your salary, the positions were not being filled. That leftover money was rolling over month after month.
Correct. So let's go back in time. So one, we went to the city to ask for $862,000, which represented the additional 2% that the governor had when he changed from 3 to 2. So when we had crafted our initial budget, it was based on level funding. In the level funding, we had accounted for the 3% increase for salaries, and then we asked for the additional 2. At that point in December, I believe, it's not a way for us to accurately predict fund balance is going to be 1 million or 5 in December. Even though, at that point, I'm sure we had bus driver positions that were unfilled with the hope that, yes, we will fill them. There are some, and Marie will tell you this, some unanticipated leaves and changes that happen in personnel. We did have some requests for, like I said, there were some reallocation requests, and I'm sure we could have done more for things that were needed that we did not do in the prior year, which would have reduced that fund balance. So I want to separate the two things of why we asked for the additional funds in projecting that. The other thing that we had discussed initially when we were developing our budget, as we were looking at the potential for fund balance, because remember in the beginning, I do think we were thinking it was going to be somewhere about 1 to 2 million maybe is what we were guessing. And we had projected that we would need somewhere around $1.4 million just to step on our salary scales. That if everybody who's still here stays here and gets the raise that is projected on the scales, we need $1.4 million, or that's a high, that's the top out number. And we wanted to put that money in a salary reserve. That was a request that I had presented to the board sometime last year as possibility for planning for salaries last year.
It's almost 5% of our annual budget. $100 million of annual budget, $5 million in new money, which we found. And I'm assuming that's not a trend going forward, right?
No.
This is one time and that's it.
It's not new money, because I would like to say that I would desperately like to fill all of my positions. So it's not new money that's just sitting there, because if for some reason, if you're out there at Lynchburg City and you want to come work for us, and you do, that's existing money to pay people who we desperately need them here. So it's not like I have a salary for them and this is additional new money that's hanging out there. It's not. Some of this is money that's committed to bringing the staff that we need here to come work with us and stay with us here. So I just don't want the public to be deceived that we have enough money to pay for the additional bus drivers and we would have extra money in this money to do some other things. That's not quite accurate.
Any other questions? Dr. Gupta, did you have another question? I'll come back. I cut him off.
That's him. I think he wanted to ask a
Okay.
question.
No, I'm good.
I'll leave the space to you.
No,
Somebody
we
go.
want you to ask. I appreciate the transparency, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the fund balance request.
Dr. Gupta, do you want to ask your questions?
No, I'll hold it.
Yes, Dr. Brennan.
Just an aside, but we had a great meeting a couple weeks ago about a public hearing about the budget for this year, and just as we're talking about these things, I hope that somehow we can, in light of the funds that we have here, which I know are not available to use for other issues, but we talked about trying to have extra spots at the governor's school, which would be about $26,000 for the first year and $56,000 after that, and I hope that somewhere in the budget we'll find that. as we discuss the budget in the future?
I thought that might be your question.
We said it had several advocates for that at the budget hearing.
And we've been receiving a number of letters from
Yeah.
parents that are very supportive of it. Ms. Carter?
And I remember us holding off on that 1.2, and that doesn't help any. So if we hold off, we need to remember these things to try to go back. But going back with the budget meeting was very beneficial. I know it's not the time, but I saw a major concern that the public wants more and more positions and jobs, and city council is saying you already are top heavy. So that's something we're going to have to look at, especially
as we're looking at the
that
budget.
That was the major thing, more and more for safety, for special needs student mental health, which is needed.
Okay, but we're looking at this vote for tonight on dealing with these, and we have a motion. I agree, as we get into budget discussions, that we need to have those conversations. They're not easy ones.
The gymnasium is Heritage Elementary.
That's to be decided.
Number 4, that's how we're classifying it.
Number 4.
Number 4.
We have a motion from Dr. Cohn and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much for that, providing that information. The next comes to the Equity Task Force Advisory Committee. We've been given a list of names for the board to approve for membership on this committee.
Yes, very well stated. Good evening. Just as Mrs. Morrison stated, you've been given a list of names of those recommended to serve on the Equity Task Force Advisory Committee for this school year. As you see, the Equity Task Force Advisory Committee purpose was assisting with the evaluation of equitable practices in 6 key areas. Those include staff, students, training, engagement and involvement, cultural diversity, and access and barriers. And so I would ask tonight that you would approve the list of names submitted.
Dr. Coleman?
Ethel,
Yes.
it's incredible work, the whole team, Dr. Edwards. And so I'm just asking a simple question. All of these names that are being submitted, their attendance in prior meetings would reflect their names being brought forward for continuance?
So those who served in the past, we did look at attendance and service to the advisory committee, yes.
Any additional questions? Dr. Nellis?
Is there an attempt, I mean, there's a lot of familiar names here. Is there an attempt to kind of recruit some new members? I mean, it'd have to be, I think it'd have to be sort of an ongoing
So the process is that the community can submit their letters of interest. In this particular cycle, because of the momentum that we had going forward with this group, we did have a large number of those who served last year wanting to continue the work. And so that, of course, decreased the number of slots that we had open to new people. As we go forward, it will be evaluated every year.
And the one thing that we will add is, and we experienced this last year where we had our meetings, or public meetings, they're open. We had our task force members at the table, but we also had visitors. So we often had community members who would just come and share thoughts and ideas. So we never turned anybody away. Where it became important for actual task force members is when we started to vote on things like what's going to be the agenda for the work session. Then we only let the actual task force members. But it was a very open and friendly and welcoming environment for anyone who wanted to come and join us.
Dr. Gupta?
Great names. I'm assuming you have some from LGBT community as part of this equity task force.
We have those who express interest in advocating for all.
Yes.
Right. I have, unless they just share their, who they are,
So
I don't ask.
to answer your question, do we have advocates for?
The answer is
yes, because the policy that was mentioned, JB and JZ or whatever, those two, one's a student, one's a staff policy that was mentioned, actually came up at Equity Task Force. and I suspect will be back on the table since they've done their large work with the volunteer policy. So the answer is yes, we do have advocates.
Any other questions? Dr. Coleman?
Recognizing the huge responsibility ahead of us outlined by the superintendent earlier in the meeting, I move to approve the names submitted for the 1920 school year.
Dr. Coleman is second by Ms. Carter. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on to the legislative agenda priority list. Dr. Brennan, you're going to take this one.
Sure. I know this is the item everyone's been looking forward to this evening, so it'll probably take less than an hour, so don't get too concerned about it.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So I want to give credit to my fellow committee members, including Dr. Nillis and Dr. Coleman and Dr. Edwards is part of this conversation. We did what you all asked us to do, or actually you helped us do this. So we discussed at the retreat. We had about 22 different items broken down by goals of legislative agenda items. And then we asked you to select the ones that you thought were most important, which you all were nice enough to do. We tallied those, and we have here in front of you the ones that came to the surface, that got the most number of votes. So we came up with 8. Under Goal 1, I'm not going to read each one, but we have one about early childhood education. We have one on student mental wellness. We have one on student success. And we have one on African American history education. Under Goal 2, we have teacher recruitment and retention. Under Goal 3, we have state testing and standards of quality and state education funding, as well as funding formula. And then on Goal 4, we have one item which doesn't have a name to it, but you can read it for yourselves.
But can we get a name for that?
Yeah, I think I made up a name. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Can you share that?
I can. It was family engagement for the bullet. But I will send that out to you with that piece. I think I did that someplace.
Would you mind emailing that to me tonight?
No, sure.
Because we're doing those posters.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Thanks, Gary. Thank you. So this was discussed at our legislative agenda committee meeting. I think all members were in support of this. We thought we'd bring it to you since we would like to discuss this at the meeting on Friday. We'd like to see if we perhaps could get a motion and a vote on this to confirm it for this evening. And at that point, I will stop and ask if any other committee members have any comments or if there's any questions.
Done an incredible job. Very, very excited about this opportunity that we've created, taken advantage of. The Virginia School Board take a legislator to breakfast and school and lunch, so we're going to do it.
Coleman is the VSBA's legislative liaison.
Yeah, I saw that. Right, so this is for action tonight, information and action, since we're having our breakfast on Friday. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve this legislative agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Is there a second? Ms. Evans? Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hey, you did well. 10 minutes. Good job. Superintendent's comments?
Certainly. Both Parent Advisory and Personnel Advisory met last month. We used a similar format that we used at the board public hearing, which was interactive and engaging. Both groups gave me feedback and strategies for 2 areas. One area was the budget. We talked about the budget, so I did get some input from my parents who attended and personnel who attended as well. And the second area, we talked about just after-school activities, given the incident that happened a couple weeks ago where we locked down EC Glass at night. And then what does that look like for community members and people inside, the mixture of having adults and kids, fans, visitors. It's very different than the controlled situation that we had during the day. So we sort of problem solved and talked a little bit about that and some things that we might be able to do to help with the communication and keeping our kids and families safe. So I was glad to be able to do that in a very interactive way. The past month has been real busy. I'm looking at the hour, so I will kind of shorten some of the things that I have to say. One, I just want to give a shout out for the University of Lynchburg and helping us with their personal finance workshop that they're having on Tuesdays, Tuesdays, which kind of complements what we're teaching kids in our schools, and they are also working with adults and families. Kudos. I didn't get a chance to go to the poetry competition that was at the academy, but I heard I missed something special. I was dealing with some other issues, but kudos to Tisha and Gabriel, and I think it's I don't know how to pronounce her name, if it's Danette Triana, I think, is it Danette Triana? Okay. Who are our third grade and middle grades and high school winners, and Dixie was there, as was Dr. Coleman was my sub, so he got to have all the fun. But I think this is a wonderful opportunity for kids, and we got some great suggestions on things that we can do to increase that. Spend some time in school buildings, talked to kids at EC Glass recently, read to kindergartners at DESI. I spoke to the AP Capstone class. They got me good with a whole bunch of questions about education. So kudos to those kids. They're doing some awesome research and, top-notch things. I went to a couple community Head Start grant program discussions, participated on the VCIC board. Looking forward to going on Saturday, November 16th, to visit with the kids who are going to attend Project Inclusion. We have 20 students from Glass and 20 students from Heritage that are going away for this week, starts in a week, training for students, and there's some staff that go along with them. But the experience that they have is life-changing in terms of creating an inclusive environment. So I'm going to go on the last day and let the kids talk to me about, hey, what's next? You've had this experience. I had the best time ever at Lincoln Elementary School with my polar bear hat and doing my first hour of ready and willing service. It was the best job I had, being ordered around, just take this order, do that, working with families. It happened to be Donuts with Dad and Caregivers Day, so we had a lot of families there. It was the book fair. It was just fun to be in a school and to hang out with the kids and families for that. As Gary said, participated on state evaluation for the Gov School, another wonderful experience in terms of the service that they provide and opportunities for our kids. I had my little milk thing, and some of you attended the Perrymount presentation on the milk, best chocolate milk ever at that school. I love that. And probably one of the biggest things I did was have our first meeting for the African American History Commission. We met last week, I guess it was, and we have two main areas that we're looking at. One is the actual standards for the history standards in Virginia, as well as just the studies in general. And the other is the professional development for how do we help staff teach the standards, how to have tough conversations. We had to select what groups we wanted to be on. I am on the professional development group, on the how do we have those tough conversations. There are a lot of talented, eager, and just great people on that committee. So I am looking forward to the work that we're going to do together. The ideas were just flowing. So I'm looking forward to our next meeting. Before traveling, I had met with some of our staff, our history teachers, just to see what we do in Lynchburg City schools from their perspective. And I believe next week I am going to meet with some students to talk to them about the experience. So really trying to get the whole picture there. We had a regional meeting in Harrisonburg for VAST. There is a lot that is going on legislatively with some proposals that are coming forward. And we'll just have to see where all the money's coming from for all of these different things. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but there are things just like we face that are competing interests as well as that. And I think that was a quick summary. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, I was at Jug Bowl, and I stayed for the first half. We sat on the the heritage side, then we moved to the glass side, so I do that, and then tag team with the Brennans on our way out. But thank you, because in the car we were driving to North Carolina. Guess what I could do on my phone? Finish watching the game because it was streaming on the phone. So if you heard me shouting in the middle of the night, because it was a very exciting game, I do appreciate the fact that we were able to do that. So that was just wonderful. And just to end on a fun note, I have some really good pancake skills because I did get to go to the Exchange Club and serve pancakes. And I will say if pancakes were an SOL test, I rocked it. I improved. I showed growth. Last year I probably threw away about 10 pancakes. This year I only had one that didn't make it. So I'm real proud of that. And again, just spending time with families and being able to help and be of service was wonderful.
That's a fun time.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, board comments. Ms. Evans, do you have anything? Dr. Gupta?
Those are pancakes too. Thanks to Miss Evans for teaching me how to make pancakes. And and I have a new family member as Mr. Harvey as my big brother. Now he can tell me the do's and don'ts I shouldn't be doing. So that's very helpful.
Mr. Harvey?
Shout out to Bass Elementary School. I got to go and visit with Ms. Hendricks. And I think as we saw earlier, they are definitely showing some improvement. But one of the things I really noticed was a lot of school pride and some citizenship. It was very, very, very strong within the school. I got to go into almost every single class. Both teachers and students were very friendly. And what I was really amazed is when I went into the classroom, it wasn't as Ms. Hendricks took me in, it wasn't disturbing to the students. They just simply looked and they paid attention to their teacher and they kept on rolling. So hats off to them. They're doing an excellent job there. Also got to attend Sandusky's Under the Sea.
I heard that was great.
Got one of my bookmarks from there. That was a wonderful time. We Dr. Nillis, Ms. Carter, and Dr. Coleman all kind of had a chance to go around Under the Sea and participate in a lot of the different activities. And I tell you, the music and art room was that was incredible. We had some swashbuckling pirates that we got to watch. That was really neat. We mentioned about the Gov School, and I shared with you some of the positive comments from superintendents. And I think I'll just share this, that within the discussions from the superintendents, it was how can we also look to the Gov School to possibly help us in our base schools. And I think that was something that was really interesting to me, and how we might look at ways that not only just facilities and infrastructure that they have, but also the student body themselves, because all of the students that go to the Gov School, they do come back to their base schools. And so what can they take from their experiences and bring back and share with us? And also two other things, just wanted to say to Dr. Edwards, I think you did an excellent job at the community information meeting at Glass, and also hosting the board public dialogue meeting. I think that was a very positive experience that we all had. So,
thank you. Dr. Brennan?
So I have to say I did not do very well with pancakes. This is my second year. I'm still not being very good at it, so I have to get Ms. Evans to help me with that. But two things. One is that for those who've been around for a while, you remember this organization called Embrace Our Schools, which is a group of families that are involved in Lynchburg City Schools that are trying to contact families who have children who are going to go into kindergarten next year and have a informal social event to help introduce them to schools in the fall. That was held recently, about 2 weekends ago. It was coordinated with the PTO presidents and members of the different elementary schools in District 1, which we were looking primarily, also T.C. Miller. We were fortunate to have Mrs. Baer from Paul Monroe, Mrs. Gray from Lincoln Elementary, and Mrs. Steele from Lincoln Elementary, from Bedford Hills, to be there. And I think it went very well. There were about 30 individuals there. There were about 6 families that have rising kindergartens, and they were all pointed at the end to go to the open houses in November at the different schools. So I think that was very helpful. Thank very much to Dr. Edwards and to her staff for allowing that to happen. And as part of my Adopt a School activities, I I observed the JAG run on Friday at Lincoln Middle School. I was not going to participate, but it was a great event. That's their fundraiser for the year. They raised $14,000, and there were students and faculty involved. It was just a great event. And then tomorrow night for Hutchinson Early Learning, I'm going to their family fun. And then I did the program at Darrington, which is Walk to School, where you go out into the community and walk back to the school. So that's been a great experience, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Dr. Sinha, do you have anything?
Well, I think so. My toddler goes to preschool where half the students are Head Start students and half are not. It's really nice. And they had a parent meeting where they did a really nice presentation on how to read to your children. And you know, I read to Nora all the time, but I really learned a lot in this thing. And it occurred to me, I mean, I'm really glad that we have early childhood education on our legislative agenda, because these kids that are going, I mean, they're 2, 3, and 4 years old. They are so advantaged now. They'll be so ready for kindergarten when the time comes that I really do hope that we can reach a place where every child can go to preschool, at least part-time, before kindergarten. It's just wonderful. But it was a really nice, and it was good turnout, very engaged parents, and they had little handouts for us and just the additional things you can do while you're reading to your children. So it was really, really nice.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Carter?
I also attended the literacy night at Sandusky Elementary under the sea, and it was just the theme just continued all throughout, and the teachers looked like they had just gotten there, and I know it was a long day. Everyone was just so motivated, and they took the opportunity to include the book sale, so that was a good way to raise money. Whatever Mr. Womack is doing to get the number of people to come, we need to find out what his secret is, because that was awesome. And one of the segment was reading to your children, and that was just great. The other one, I went to Lights On after school at Heritage, and seeing all Heritage Elementary, seeing all of the wonderful, innovative things that they're doing. One was photography with Mrs. Spain, and the crafts with Mrs. Speck, I believe. They're doing crafts that you can design them on the computer, and then it prints out or shows you how to do it, and so it's elevated, it's not your crafts of old. And for the Adopt a School, I did Robert S. Payne, the bike giveaway, and just to see the smiles on the kids' faces and all of the law enforcement people that were there, it was just awesome. And they were cool bikes. One was green, and it was pretty cool. And also participated in the Ann Spencer Poetry Contest, and whoever is with R.S. Payne, they really understand and know it, and they have a lot of competitors, and I wish more schools would participate. And I was able to, that morning I was at the Empowerment Academy, and I sat right behind one of the students that won that night for that. And the Empowerment Academy too, they had a motivational speaker, Walter Virgil, and he talked about, are you a liability or an asset? And he really brought it down to the classroom level. When you go into a classroom, are you taking or are you giving? And I think that really, when he said that, I think the light bulb went on. That was just awesome. And again, I talked about the budget meeting, how people are really asking for more staff for different things, and we'll have to look at that. Heritage win, woohoo! And I heard from regarding the public meetings, 2 parents came to me and just talked about some of the people that presented were rather rude, but that you did an amazing job, and that people need to look at this, how they're role modeling things when they're presenting. We can present and we can have discussions, but you really need to be respectful. But they just applauded you and said just how wonderful you handled that situation. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, I went to the math night at Sheffield. So I thought Miss Lee and her crew had a pretty good turnout. They had pizza, which always helps draw people in. And so you need to go and look at the math problems that they had up on the wall. They're not. They're challenging. They're challenging. So it's math is different than when I went to elementary school. So And I did enjoy the literacy night at Sandusky Elementary. I got a couple of, I don't have any kids at home that I need to read to, but I do have grandkids that come and visit, or we go visit, so I have a couple of new books for them. So it was all great.
Thank you. Dr. Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really proud of the Finance Committee, the Chair, and all of you for the great work that is happening in that area. As I shared at the retreat, I really had a tremendous opportunity of growing, being a part of the Virginia Teacher of the Year selection panel, and I gave a report to each of you, but there's some really incredible pieces, one of which I shared. Dr. Gupta and I attended a luncheon, I believe it was today, citizenship and building a better, safer world and trying to get people connected. So there are a lot of ideas that folk around the Commonwealth have that could help in the teaching profession that I hope we will take a good, solid look at. I did get an opportunity. Thank you, Ethel and Dr. Cam and all of those folk, as Sharon just mentioned, about the bike giveaways. I attended that at Perrymont and Heritage, and actually rode in on a bike far too small for me. And I did the best I could. I do want to mention the Sandusky Elementary piece. What I enjoyed most about the night was the shrimp that they served for the food. And so, anyway, at 6 o'clock in the morning, that's what you do with the pancake jamboree. I told Dr. Copeland I would be there, and I was there at 6 o'clock and didn't leave until 7:15, and I assisted the individuals that were cooking the pancakes. All right, and then I want to conclude by stating that I did attend the Jug Bowl. That was awesome. A shout out to Andre Kendrick and his son. I mean, it's just an amazing father-son story, and I'm very proud of that. My daughter attends Heritage, and I'll leave that alone. And tomorrow I will be speaking at DESI for an SGA assembly in the morning, talking about elections. And so I'm going to give a 2-minute presentation to encourage the children to participate in the electoral process of the SGA.
Thank you. Well, briefly, I just need to say thank you to all of this board for my 3-week medical leave, and that the support you gave me, and it was very nice. Thank you. But I want to give a special thank you to Dr. Coleman, who attended the meetings on my behalf, represented the board, and did an outstanding job. So thank you, and I felt really comfortable not being here. I missed it, and my 3 adopted schools. I promise that I'll get back in the swing of things. I've been out of it, but thank you very much. And with that, information. Oh, thank you. I'm just tired. All right, in honor of the VSBA Take Your Legislator to School Month, the Lynchburg City School Board is sponsoring a legislative breakfast on November 8th, 2019. The VSBA Annual Convention is scheduled for November 20th to 22nd, 2019 in Williamsburg, Virginia, and I think we have 7 school board members and our superintendent attending. The next school board meeting will be held on Tuesday, December 3rd at 5 p.m. in the boardroom at the administration building. The next school board work session is scheduled for December 17th. The focus of the discussion will be the LCA volunteer policy and regulations. And I electronically sent all of you the delegate handbook. I was supposed to be the delegate, and Sharon was the alternate. Since I am unable to attend, Sharon will be the delegate. We will decide an alternate, and please review that handbook. But I think I sent it out in July or August, September it says, and she needs to know if you have any objections to any of the legislative positions. Did you hear that? She needs to, okay. All right. Did I forget anything? We're adjourned.